Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Studios. Connor is in today for Ian. He'll be with us for a little bit. Many people, by the way, don't know that Connor is the producer of the award-winning pregame show during the football season. So, Connor, I am happy enough to have you riding with us for a little bit here. How are you?
I'm doing well, Jared. How are you? It's great to be here with you and to be along for the ride for a couple weeks.
There we go. I am outstanding. So I want to start on this, and I hope everybody had a great weekend and a great long weekend. And, of course, we always talk about what's, the importance of Memorial Day and for those that have given the ultimate sacrifice. And, again, thankful to everybody who has served and will continue to serve our great armed forces. I want to start with this, though, because I saw that Bussin' with the Boys had Ran Carthon on their show. They were putting it out there on social media. I'm not exactly sure where. And it was Ran Carthon on Bussin' with the Boys. Now, look, I'm not a Bussin' with the Boys kind of guy. When they sit around and talk about what kind of dip flavors they like or the little dip packet things or whatever it's called, I don't care about that. So I fast forward through all that, but when the GM talks, the coach talks, Derrick Henry talks, it's like, okay, got to listen to Bussin' with the Boys. And there were a lot of different takeaways I had, but the big takeaway that I walked out of this with was, I don't know if Ran Carthon wanted to fire Mike Vrabel. Like, I'm not saying this is like I'm not making an accusation here. Like, I'm not saying like Ran Carthon didn't want to fire Mike Vrabel in there. I'm not saying that. But I listened to the whole interview, and my biggest takeaway was, I'm not sure Ran Carthon wanted to fire Mike Vrabel. Because he went on the podcast, he basically said that his world was shaken upside down when Vrabel got fired. The first thing he said, and I believe this was unprompted, Will Compton asked him about, the difference between year one as a GM and year two as a GM. And here's what Ran Carthon said about how important that guy you hate so much, big bad Mike Vrabel, this is how important Mike Vrabel was to Ran Carthon in year one as a general manager.
Last year, I couldn't imagine doing it without Vrabes, because he's a vet, one of the smartest, football minds I've ever been around. And just having him there to bounce things off of, because I don't give a damn what position you're in. You've never done it till you've done it. You can read every book there is. I can go and read every book there is on how to play basketball, but I've never played basketball till I've been out there on that court. And so that's how it was for me in the GM spot. But I had a guy in Mike that I can go and say, hey, man, like, how does this part work? Or I'm not sure, about this.
So wait a minute. So Ran Carthon's like, thank God I had Mike Vrabel there with me that first year. I could not imagine year one without Mike Vrabel. And he called him one of the smartest minds he's been around. They fired him. Then, when Vrabel got fired, Ran Carthon said, they always say, hey, even though these guys make a lot of money and even though they're almost like characters in a TV show to us, because we watch them on TV. I mean, these are real people with real lives and real families and things like that. Ran Carthon said Vrabel's firing affected his own family. Take a listen.
How was that transition for y'all? How those discussions, for what you can say?
I'd say it was tough. That day was really tough. I'll speak personally. It was one of those, and this is just being full transparent. When it happened, I called my wife, and I was like, hey, like this just happened. And the first thing my wife says is, you need to call Rhea, which is my daughter. And I'm like, why? She was like, because she doesn't need to hear that coach got fired from one of the kids in school, because my kids don't have social media. And so my daughter had a really close relationship with Mike. And if you look on her screensaver on her phone right now, it's a picture of her and Mike, and that hasn't changed. And so, not only to have that happen to him, but to now I got to communicate this to my daughter, and then to have he's now 7-year-old son who he thinks he's the GM and the owner and the head coach. He legitimately when he got out of school, my wife told him, and he was like, what are you doing? Like, my son said this to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was tough.
Okay, so now we have to talk to the daughter, because the daughter was so close with Mike Vrabel that she had a picture on her screensaver of her and Uncle Mike. And the son was flabbergasted, just floored that they fired Mike Vrabel. By the way, it should be noted that on that Tuesday, and I hope Rand's kids don't listen to the radio. If they do on the way home, that's their business, not mine. But on the Tuesday, Vrabel got fired. On Monday, we did the whole show saying, hey, I'm hearing Vrabel might get fired. Like, that was the whole show. This was not a surprise that Vrabel got fired. And yet at the same time, like, the Carthons are that tight with Uncle Mike? Like, okay. And then, now, I agree with this, what Rand Carthon said about the future of Mike Vrabel. But again, this is not something you say about somebody you don't like.
And again, listen, Mike will be coaching in no time. He'll be back on the sideline in no time, and he's going to do well wherever he goes, because that's just in his DNA and who he is.
I mean, again, it's just that guy. They fired Mike Vrabel, and I thought he was a part of the decision to fire Mike Vrabel. But after hearing that on Bussin' with the Boys, I took a step back, and I'm like, you know what? Every opportunity there has been for Rand Carthon to either co-sign on the decision to fire Mike Vrabel or to distance himself from the firing of Mike Vrabel, he has distanced himself. This was the day Vrabel got fired with that horrendous ball didn't bounce our way press conference. And this is what Rand Carthon said when he was asked about how Vrabel, Vrabel doesn't have a job today. Can you help us understand?
Mike Vrabel doesn't have a job today. What is the disconnect there?
Well, I think Amy spoke to her decision, of making, of the decision she made and why, and that was about her long-term vision, of the organization, and that's really, I think, what it was.
Okay, so again, Amy, I think that's what Amy wanted. Amy distancing himself from that. That wasn't my decision. That was Amy's decision. That wasn't my decision. My daughter has a picture with Vrabel as her screensaver on her phone. Which, again, brings me back to, did Rand Carthon want to fire Mike Vrabel? Because it sounds like Rand Carthon didn't want to fire Mike Vrabel. And that leads me to the second question, which is, does it matter? And again, these are questions. Like, I know you guys are going, Jared Stillman just started. But does it matter if the GM wants to fire the coach or not? I mean, again, I'm not complaining for the sake of complaining, but, like, who's running the Titans? Like, is Amy running the Titans and Rand's just a part of it? Because, now remember I said at the time that I wanted to clean house. Like, I wanted to start over. I wanted to fire the coach, fire the GM, fire everybody, and let's start from scratch and go from there. And everybody got mad because the GM had only been on the job for a year, and so everybody made it about that, even though really I was just saying this whole Fakakta system that they put in place that I knew wasn't going to work. I told you guys wasn't going to work. I thought it was ridiculous, and I want the GM in charge of the coach. And I want the GM to hire the coach, because 90% of the time when the GM doesn't hire the coach, the first thing the GM's going to do is chop out the coach. So let's just start over. Let's start fresh. And I didn't feel like Rand had earned a promotion from the Titans, which he did get. And the results last year, in my opinion, did not warrant a promotion. But again, I want the GM over the coach. And it seems like they kind of put the GM over the coach this year. But then you listen to Rand tell it like, oh, his kids were furious that they fired Vrabel. And, like, either that's not the truth or Rand was as shocked about it as the kids were. When, again, on the Monday show, I was telling you, like, guys, I am hearing that Vrabel's about to get fired. Like, I said, I don't think Vrabel's going to be the coach next year. And that if Vrabel goes back, I was told this, that he wanted more defined roles for Chad Brinker, Anthony Robinson, and Rand Carthon, and he wanted somebody kind of over all of them, and then, oh, that's not true. And then they put Chad Brinker in that spot. So, I mean, I don't know. And then again, I don't know. Does it matter if the GM wanted to fire the coach or not. The owner owns the team. So I walked away from this thinking, one, did Rand want to fire Mike Vrabel? Like, all we heard was about, Rand versus Vrabel. And I'll be honest, I perpetuated a lot of that because reading the tea leaves and knowing Vrabel the way that I did, it felt like there were a lot of pointed shots in Rand's direction. But then when they broke up at the end of the year, it felt almost inevitable that everything that everybody was speculating was happening, that everybody there said, oh, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, was in fact true. So I kind of wonder about that. Or like, is Amy just running roughshod and Rand's along for the ride? And again, that takes me to, does it matter if the GM is on board with firing the coach? And what was Rand's involvement in Vrabel's firing? Was he against it? Was he for it? Was he consulted about it? I mean, if we're collaborating and we're trying to all work together and everybody pulls the rope in the same direction, don't you think you talk to the GM before you fired the coach? Say, hey, what do you think about old Vrabel? You think we should keep him? You think we shouldn't? Did they not care what he thought? Like, I don't know the answer to this. It's a long-winded way of me saying this doesn't really seem to add up. It kind of feels like, and again, I have no idea, I wasn't there. It kind of feels like Rand was just yes-mamming Amy all the time. Mike's coming back? Yes, ma'am. You're firing Mike? Yes, ma'am. And I'll be totally honest. I don't know how I feel about that. Like, if that's the case, I don't know how I feel. On one hand, fighting the owner's decision is never a good idea. I don't care if it's the Titans. I don't care if it's the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Raiders, anybody but the Packers, since they don't have an owner. It is not a good idea to fight with the owner. Bill Parcells used to do that all the time, and we know how that used to end for Bill Parcells. So it's like I can't say that Rand Carthon, if Amy was hell-bent on firing Vrabel, should have stuck his neck on the line to say, no, don't do that. Mike's a great coach. He is a brilliant football guy. We need him to build this program. I believe in him. I don't know if that's the best idea in the world. But at the same time, on the other hand, if the GM really believes in somebody, whether it is a coach, a quarterback, a draft choice, a free agent signing, I feel like the GM has got to stand up, even to the owner, to say, hey, this is what I believe. And sometimes it may not be what the owner wants to hear, and sometimes it may not be popular to say it, right? Like, it may not be popular. If she's hell-bent on firing Vrabel, it may not be popular in the room to say, guys, I think we're making a massive mistake here if we fire Mike Vrabel. And it also may not be a popular decision with Mike Vrabel if you were to say, hey, look, I like Mike, my kids like Mike, but we got to go in a different direction. This ain't working out. This guy, he don't know ball. Like, these coaches are terrible. The offensive line coach just yells turbo and they hit each other at the pads. Like, we got to do something about it. But I need the GM to, I do feel like at some point the GM has got to take a stand for what the GM believes in. Because if you don't do that, then you're going to live with regret. Because everybody that gets hired into these jobs, coaches, GMs, they get hired to get fired, right? Like, at some point, Andrew Burnett is getting fired from the Predators. But it's like, did you stand up? Did you go down based on what you believed in? And I don't know if Rand Carthon wanted to fire Vrabel or not. And so when I listened to that interview, I wasn't expecting Rand to throw Vrabel under the bus. I wasn't expecting to hear, oh, yeah, that Vrabel, he couldn't hire an offensive coordinator if his life depended on it. I wasn't expecting that. But to hear like it was so tough on my family when Vrabel got fired, I'm like, whoa. Normally, I don't know about you guys. Now, you can't tell kids anything. Because you tell your kids you're going to fire Mike Vrabel, the kids are going to school, they're going to tell everybody. You can't do that. Normally, the family has a pretty good idea when it's coming. Like, normally the family has a pretty good idea of like, hey, look, just so you know, like, there's a lot that's going to be out there. You may get told at school. Just know that if something happens, Dad will tell you. Usually it's that kind of thing. So, again, I don't know if Rand wanted to fire Mike Vrabel. I just that interview, I walked away. I'm like, so did he want to fire Mike Vrabel or not? And then if he didn't want to fire Mike Vrabel, it's like, well, then what? Like, what's he do? And that's kind of where I am after listening to the Rand Carthon Bussin' with the Boys interview. I'm like, whoa, what happened here? Why did it happen? I thought these guys didn't see eye to eye. Now I'm being told, oh, no, thank God I had Mike Vrabel with me. He's one of the smartest football minds the world's ever had. Okay, so are you for it or are you against it? 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. I have not looked at the text line. I'm sure that the text line is going to be, it's going to be a mix of like, oh, Jared, he's just saying that because, or, oh, Jared, you're just starting this. Again, I'm just asking the question. So did you want to fire Mike Vrabel or did you not want to fire Mike Vrabel? Were you on board with it? Or would you have been on board with it if she had walked in and said, I'm hiring Jared Stillman to be the head coach? Somebody tell me what's what. 615-737-1025. Plus, I think that the Titans have got to learn a very important lesson here about all of this. About this, like the constant ambiguity surrounding the Titans. We'll get to that next. Here on Stillman and Company, let's talk Window Nation. That's right. I love Window Nation. I had Window Nation out to my home. Window Nation, they give you bonus savings if you schedule the in-home consultation. And that's bonus savings on top of their semi-annual sale, which we'll get to in a second. But I had the in-home consultation. When I had Window Nation out to my home, I said, okay, let's see what this sales pitch is going to be like. Let's see and their window expert came to my home, showed me all their different window types and everything. And I said, okay, what do you think? And they went and looked at my windows. She came back. She said, you don't need new windows. I said, what? She said, no, your windows are fine. You do not need new windows. Now, a lot of you out there are not as fortunate in terms of windows because you do need them, like yours are foggy, or now with the heat, like that sun's going to hit it and you're going to have to jack up the AC. It's going to cost you hundreds of dollars a month. You don't want that. But that's how I knew that Window Nation was an honest company. So there's a lot of window companies out there. They're stuffing your mailbox. They all got similar kind of pitch. I can't tell you about them. I can't tell you about the quality of their work. I can't tell you whether or not you can trust them. I can promise you can trust Window Nation. And right now they do have the semi-annual sale. 50% off all windows, no interest for 5 years, and bonus savings when you schedule that consult. That's 50% off all windows, no interest for 5 years, and bonus savings. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. That's 866-90-NATION. windownation.com.
I'm not on social media, but you can feel heat. You know what I mean? You can feel heat, and I knew what it was, but I also knew that it was, unfortunate that it happened. And again, listen, Mike will be coaching in no time. He'll be back on the sideline in no time, and he's going to do well wherever he goes because that's just in his DNA and who he is. But I knew after that happened, it was no time to sit back and sulk and, lick your wounds. It was like, we have to deliver the next guy.
That was Rand Carthon on Bussin' with the Boys. And again, it's like, oh no, Mike Vrabel's a great coach. Thank God I had Mike Vrabel there. Man, it was tough on my family. It was. And I'm still trying to figure out. So did you want to fire Mike Vrabel or did you not want to fire Mike Vrabel? And it led me to this today because I was going through the old cuts from the day that they fired Vrabel and they put Rand Carthon out there in that disastrous ball didn't bounce our way press conference. I mean, that press conference was so bad. Like, it's an all-timer. I mean, I think even the people like the biggest defenders, the true blue Kool-Aid drinkers, like they're just trying to wipe that press conference from their memory because it was so bad. But it was an unmitigated disaster. Everybody in the organization deserved an F for that press conference, led by the owner. Not led by the owner, but the owner deserved an F for that too. Sticking Rand out there, and then Rand says, well, it's Amy's decision, so you got to talk to Amy. And it's like, well, which leads me to this. Why didn't the Titans just, when they fired Vrabel? And this is more advice than it is going back to the decision to fire Vrabel or even like, this is what you should have done. Yes, but it's more so when something like this happens in the future. Why don't you just tell the truth? Like, why don't you just give it to us straight? I don't see why the Titans, after they fired Mike Vrabel and hired Brian Callahan, didn't just sit there and say, like, hey, we wanted to go with an offensive head coach. We got a young quarterback and a young offense, and we loved Mike Vrabel, and we loved his wife, and we loved his kids, and we had tons of success with Mike Vrabel, but our offense the last 2 years was subpar, and with a young quarterback and where the league is headed and with the guru coaches, as we talk about in the program, we just felt like we needed to make a change. Why could you not say that? Like, I understand the idea of the day that you fired Mike Vrabel not wanting to get up there and sit there and say, well, we only want an offensive coach because who knows? Maybe Mike McDonald is the next Bill Belichick. I don't know. So I understand, hey, let's canvass the market. I was going to go nuts if they hired a defensive coach, but let's canvass the market, see what's out there. Let's not try. Fine. But once you hire Brian Callahan and the hay's in the barn, then can't you kind of shoot people straight and say, hey, where the game is headed, where San Francisco is, where Miami is, where the Packers are, where the Rams are, Cincinnati, it's the guru coach. And that's what we wanted. We wanted the next guy off the tree. We want to run that offense. We don't want, because Vrabel, and I'll say this, like I would have fired Vrabel if I owned this football team. And the biggest reason why I would have fired Vrabel, and I said this before last year's draft, because we talked a lot about Richardson and Levis and Hooker, and we talked about those guys, and a lot of people would text in and they'd say, well, do you trust this coaching staff to be able to develop a quarterback? And I would say, if you don't trust your coaching staff to develop a quarterback, you need to fire your coaching staff. Developing the quarterback is the most important part of running a football team. I mean, anybody can own the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes is the only guy that can quarterback them to championships. So, I mean, developing the quarterback is most important. If you don't think your coach can do it, you have to fire him. And for me with Vrabel, I felt like two things. Number one, I thought Vrabel was too much of an a-hole, and it had finally gotten to a point to where it now was featuring or bringing back diminishing returns. Secondly, I got to do better than this guy's just throwing darts to figure out offensive coordinator. It's like he hired Matt LaFleur because they liked Matt LaFleur when they interviewed him for the head coaching job, and Vrabel was like, okay. And then they just promoted Arthur Smith because Vrabel, again, such an a-hole that when LaFleur tried to bring Arthur Smith to Green Bay, Vrabel threw up the stop sign at third base like, no, he's my coordinator. Arthur was great. Arthur leaves, and then he promotes Todd Downing, and he keeps him, and then he brings him to – it's like, dude, you have no idea how to pick out a good coordinator. You got lucky the one time, but again, it's just throwing darts. And for me, that's enough. Where the game's headed, the guru coach, that's a – but if the Titans had just told everybody the truth when it happened, like had just been honest and said, hey, we felt like we had to go in a different direction. We felt like Vrabel was no longer where our team was. He was no longer the best coach for what we were looking to do. We are looking to build a team. When we brought Mike Vrabel in here, we had been to the divisional round of the playoffs. We were looking for a guy to push that team further. Right now, we're looking to build that team, and we just don't think Mike's the best coach for that. It's not the end of the world to tell the truth. But what happens is, and the Titans are guilty of this, the Predators have done some of this, but Barry Trotz doesn't really do this. But what the Titans have done is the Titans always leave this giant space of ambiguity to which it's like, well, why'd that happen? Or why'd this happen? Or why'd that happen? And then people get angry about things and conspiracy theories come out and who knows what to believe? And you don't need that. And you can tell me all you want that Vrabel and Rand are best buddies. Maybe they are. I don't know that, but maybe they are. Again, Rand says his daughter's screensaver on her phone is a picture of Vrabel and her. Maybe that's true. But it does you no good for the entire season to have this giant cloud over the team about who's in charge and are these guys stabbing each other in the back and whose fault is it and who wanted Andre Dillard. And you see what I'm saying? So why don't you just tell the truth? Like, what's Chad Brinker do? Who's in charge, Rand or Chad Brinker? We don't know. Just tell the truth. And this is gonna keep going until the Titans decide, not everything has to be the CIA, right? Like, not everything, not every decision we make has to be loaded behind a vault. Now, there is one thing I do think the Titans are lying about that I think the Titans have to lie about, and I'll give them credit on that, and that's all the Bill Callahan stuff. When they say that Brian Callahan didn't originally plan to bring Bill Callahan along, and that, I don't believe it. Because I think what the Titans are doing is they're covering their tushies because Bill Callahan was under contract to Cleveland. You come out and say, oh, yeah, we asked Brian, hey, you bringing Dad? And Brian's like, yeah, I'm going to bring Dad. We just have to get him out of his contract to Cleveland. Now you're going to have to give up a draft choice because they're going to hit you with a tampering charge. So I understand that lie. That I get. But everything else, it's like, guys, it's okay. You can say, we fired Vrabel because he can't hire a coaching staff. You can say that. It's okay. 615-737-1025. A lot of you want to weigh in on this, so we will get to that. 615-737-1025. And I think I should save my, again, more advice that I have. I do have more advice that I do think would help Rand and Brian Callahan out. We'll save that for a little bit. We'll get to your phones. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to weigh in on the Stillman and Company program, 615-737-1025. And let me tell all the fine folks to purchase your tickets now for the Music City Grand Prix at the National Superspeedway, Friday, September 13th through Sunday, September 15th at MusicCityGP.com. Use promo code GAME for a 20% discount now through June 16th. Okay, your thoughts on Vrabel?
I was shocked. I mean, that, and they bring in Brian, Callahan from the Bengals, who didn't even call his plays there with Zach Taylor. I thought that was a horrific decision by the ownership of Nashville. I made no sense. Now, I know Vrabel didn't get another job, so that makes them look good that he wasn't gobbled up by somebody else.
Sure.
But Vrabel's a hell of a coach. Does a good job. He doesn't really have that well-known quarterback yet. We don't know about Levis. He looks like he might be good, but you can't. He had the one great game against Miami. You can't swear on that right now. We were all surprised. No, we weren't shocked because we think we maybe saw this coming. They did let A.J. Brown go a couple years ago. Maybe Vrabel wasn't on that page to do that. But, yes, most football people were surprised that Vrabel was let go. And most football people think, not that I talked to them, but this is just me listening, most people think that Vrabel got a raw deal.
That was Mad Dog Russo on our show at the Super Bowl. And I do remember when we had Mad Dog on the program, which, we had Mad Dog on for like 30 minutes. And Mad Dog does not just do 30 minutes in Nashville, Tennessee. And I thought that was pretty cool. And we had Mad Dog on, and the amount of people that text into the text line mad at Mad Dog being like, the national media doesn't understand why they fired Vrabel, Jared. They don't this, they don't. Well, apparently Rand Carthon's son didn't either. Because Rand Carthon told Buzzin' with the Boys that his son, who's 7 years old, was like, you did what? So I don't know, maybe the Carthons were pro Vrabel. I can't. Who knows? Let's get to some of your phones on this because a lot of you want to weigh in. Sean in Murray, Kentucky says, Jared, could it possibly be that it was Chad Brinker who was the one feuding with Vrabel or working behind closed doors to get his president of football operations status? It's possible. The thing about the Titans is that, somebody texted into the text line and said, when do the Titans ever tell the truth? Because, again, all I said was in the last segment, if you just tell the truth, if you just sit there and say, hey, this is why we decided to make the change at coach, this is what – Brian Callahan does not have Mike Vrabel's resume. In terms of if I were to go out there and I were to say, hey, here's Coach A and here's Coach B, right? Because he's never coached a game as a head coach. He does not have his resume. But I understand why Brian Callahan is a better fit for this Titans team than Mike Vrabel. But the Titans don't ever want to explain the context. The Titans just want nobody to be pissed off. They want every narrative to be good. They just want it. And so that one texter says, when did the Titans ever tell the truth? Well, I go back to when Diana Rossini on Thanksgiving put out the story that Mike Vrabel was coming back. And the end of the story said, ready, steady, Vrabel, which to this day I'm not sure exactly what that means. But the end of the story had that, and it was like, hey, Mike Vrabel is not going anywhere. And I did a show on Black Friday, because I always do a show on Black Friday. And I did a show on Black Friday, and I said, yeah, I don't believe it. But Diana said, I know. And I don't believe it. And Joe got mad when I said that it was Amy that Diana talked to. So I guess it wasn't Amy. But I think it was Amy that Diana talked to. Joe went like full defense of Diana Rossini. They're co-workers at the New York Times, The Athletic. Joe went full defense of Diana Rossini when that story came out because a lot of people made the conclusion that Diana was just carrying the water of Mike Vrabel because that happened quite often when Mike Vrabel was the coach. And Joe was like, hey, at the New York Times, we're not allowed to say, sources say Vrabel's coming back if the source is Vrabel because Vrabel doesn't make that decision. And again, I don't know the exact words Joe said, so I am paraphrasing here. But whoever Diana talked to had to have the ability to make the decision as to whether or not Mike Vrabel was coming back. And again, it was definitive Vrabel was coming back. And I said at the time, I don't think Diana is lying. A reporter's job is to report. So Diana is reporting what she is being told by somebody in a position of authority. The difference is, I don't trust them because they said Mike Mularkey 6 years ago or however long ago it was, they said Mike Mularkey was coming back as the head coach and they fired him a week later. So if you lied to me once, why am I going to? And I know, well, Jared, that was different. No. So to answer your question, I can't tell you the last time Titans told the truth. I mean, we did the media thing over at the Titans house last week, and I asked, so what are the PSL prices for all the other ones? And they were like, oh, we don't know yet. And I'm like, but you're having people come pick out their seats this week. Uh-huh. So, I mean, again, would it hurt the Titans to tell the truth every now and then? And that's where I go back to, like, maybe Rand really did like Mike Vrabel. I mean, again, he has tried to distance himself from the Vrabel firing as much as humanly possible. Outside of the hunting together comment that he made or whatever. Well, hunting together is different than hunting at the same time or whatever it was he said. Like, that's the one dig that it's like, ooh, that feels like a shot at Vrabel. Everything else has been a total distance from that decision. And I understand the idea of, like, hey, he's not going to come out, get up there and say, I think it's a terrible idea to fire Mike Vrabel, because then Amy's going to fire him next. So I understand that. But at the same time, like when my bosses say, hey, Jared, don't bang on people who cheer for the Milwaukee Admirals all the time. It's like, okay, fine, all right. But at the end of the day, if my bosses are like, hey, man, we're going to go in a complete 180, we're going to make a complete 180 decision as to what you believe in, I'm not going to endorse it. I may not say anything about it, but I'm not going to endorse it. Just like I'm not sitting here telling you, hey, the Milwaukee Admirals are in the Conference Champion Cup, because I don't give a rat's ass. We care about the NHL playoffs, not the AHL playoffs around here. I say we, me. Craig says, if the Titans had an established quarterback, I probably would keep Vrabel, but he's not the guy to grow a young quarterback. Ding, 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 ding. Yes. I keep telling people, if Vrabel goes and gets a job with a team that has a quarterback, he's going to win. So Buffalo, Philadelphia, Dallas, if they don't have the seasons they think they're going to have and Vrabel gets that job, he's going to win. If Vrabel takes a job like the Carolina job this past offseason, he's screwed. Because he's not going to be able to fix that mess. That is, I think, Craig, very well said. Incredibly well. I do not think Vrabel can grow a quarterback. And I don't think he's the only coach out there that can't do that. I think there are a lot of coaches. Now, I say that with an asterisk. If he has the right offensive coordinator, I think he can do it, but I don't think he knows how to pick the right offensive coordinator. So maybe he gets lucky and he throws the dart and hits the bullseye like he did with Arthur Smith, and then he develops a quarterback. But at the same time, I don't feel confident in his ability to do that, so I'm not banking on him. Like, if I owned the Titans and I hired Brian Callahan and it doesn't work out, and it might not, 60% of these guys get fired pretty quickly, I think. But if it doesn't work out with Brian Callahan, I'd go up to that podium and I'd say, look, we went the route of the guru coach. We interviewed him. We thought he had a great plan. We really wanted it to work. It just didn't work for whatever reason it may be. And now we're moving on. I don't have a problem with taking a swing when the swing makes sense to take. What I have a problem with is sitting there doing something and then just not being transparent about it at all and then saying, just trust us. It's like we did and you sucked last year. So why should we just trust you all the time? That right there, I think is a little different. John Robbins was like, hey, just trust me. Just trust me. And when he fired Mike Mularkey, it worked. Just trust me when he drafted Jeffrey Simmons, and it worked. Just trust me when he drafted Caleb Farley. Just trust me when he traded for Julio Jones. Nope. Just trust me traded A.J. Brown. Eventually that just trust me, people stop trusting you. That's kind of where I feel like I am with the Titans. 615-737-1025. We'll get back into your phone. 615-737-1025. Coming up next. People die, and it sucks. Again, I think we all, I don't want to sit here and say, I think we'd all agree that dying sucks. But then there are some people, they die, and it really hits you. And so I wanted to take a segment to talk about Bill Walton. Because I never met Bill Walton, But, man, did it hit me in the gut when I found out Bill Walton passed away yesterday. I want to get to that next, and we will. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 The Game. Stillman and Company. Yesterday, I was sitting on the couch, and I was scrolling Twitter, which, during the holidays, the vacations, I probably shouldn't do as much. But I saw the announcement that the NBA made that Bill Walton had passed away at the age of 71. And it hit me square in the gut. Now, I've never met Bill Walton. In fact, I was thinking about it today. Now, I covered the Celtics for a year when I was in New England in 2013, and maybe that would have been the only opportunity I would have had to ever cross paths with Bill Walton like that. So I never met Bill Walton. But last night, I could not get enough of the Bill Walton commentary. I mean, I was on my phone, searching on YouTube, the tributes that every media person in the country put out there for Bill Walton. I saw PTI, I saw NBA Countdown, I saw Stephen A. Smith, Jay Billis, Dave Pash, and I mean, there was not one bad word to be said about Bill Walton. And so, yesterday, thinking about Bill Walton's death, and 71 years old is way too soon. I actually realized that Bill Walton's death, I love Walton as a broadcaster, and I know Walton was an all-time great player. You know, Floyd was a GA at UCLA when John Wooden had those unbelievable teams, and he would talk about Walton and Kareem and just how good they were. But Bill Walton's death, while I hope to never die, unfortunately it's inevitable, but while I hope to never die, Bill Walton's death is something that I actually kind of envy. Because yesterday, thousands upon thousands of tributes came in of people saying literally nothing but great things about Bill Walton. And almost every single person, and again, I didn't know Walton, but every person who did know Walton talked about how Walton truly embraced living life. I listened to the whole 4-minute answer. You know, people go into these press conferences and they take their phones and they take videos and put them on Twitter of people talking, and the audio quality is terrible. But, you know, at least they can't edit things out. It's kind of said in live time, you know, whatever. I watched a 4-minute video of that terrible audio quality of Rick Carlisle, the coach of the Pacers, talking about when he took his wife on their first date to a Dead & Company show, and Bill Walton's the one that hooked him up because Bill Walton basically was a member of the band, and he went around back saying, oh, yeah, tell him that Bill Walton is the one that took care of it. I mean, that's the kind of guy that everybody was making Bill Walton out to be. And again, Bill Walton, all-time great player. Bill Walton was one of, if not the greatest college basketball player of all time. He was a great NBA player. You know, Bird steals the pass. I believe it was 86 when Bird stole the pass. And there's Walton on the bench, just got his hands in the air. Now, I never watched Walton. I'm too young to be somebody that watched Walton play, though I am familiar with things that have happened before I was alive. But he was a great player. He was on the 50th anniversary team, the 75th anniversary team. You know, I know the broadcaster because I grew up in the Michael Jordan NBA era, which was the NBA on NBC, which meant Marv Albert, Mike Fratello, or Marv Albert, Isaiah Thomas, or Bob Costas, Isaiah Thomas, Doug Collins. But for a while there, they had Walton as kind of the number one analyst or the number two analyst. And after the Jordan era was over, it was Walton and Steve Snapper Jones, the late Steve Snapper Jones. He was great too. And they were just tremendous to listen to. And of course, then when he did college games, you know, Walton was just winging it. And there was this sense about Bill Walton that, hey, most guys need to show up, do the game. They need to wear a coat and tie. They need to break down the game. They need to, not Bill Walton. And if you had asked Bill Walton to do those things at his later years, it would have been like, nobody wants to watch that. Walton had what I called made man status. He had the id-gaff muscle. He could say or do whatever he wanted, and it didn't matter. He had enough money. He had anybody who wanted, if he wanted their platform, they'd give it to him because Walton could command people's attention, kind of like Charles Barkley now. And I said that I envied his death. Well, again, I don't ever want to die, and I don't envy anybody for dying, even though it is inevitable. I envy the fact that it seems like Bill Walton was the best at what he did in everything that he did. He was the best player. He was the best broadcaster. Apparently, he was the best friend. He was a mentor to a lot of people. I was reading Dave Pasch, his longtime broadcast partner on ESPN, doing those Pac-12 games, and I was reading Dave Pasch's Twitter this morning, and he could not stop himself but to post old text chains from Bill Walton. And just funny stuff. You know, Walton would text him when he was calling a game, and Walton knew he was calling the game, but Walton would pretend like he wasn't calling the game, and Walton would send him text messages. And there's a part of me that can relate to that. Obviously, having a broadcast partner that passed away, and having it be so tragic, and having it be somebody who, again, I had the utmost respect for. Dave Pasch had the utmost respect for Bill Walton. And I just think it's really awesome that while it's terrible that Bill Walton's gone, and it's terrible that Bill Walton's gone at such a young age. 71 is young. I think it's pretty commendable that the reaction to Bill Walton's death is so universally mourned because he was that great. Now, a lot of people, we throw around the term GOAT a lot, on social media. Oh, yeah, he's the GOAT. And very rarely are they the GOAT. Oh, yeah, he's a legend. And very rarely are they a legend. Scott Rowland's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. No disrespect to Scott. He's not a legend. Walton was a legend. And just like when Muhammad Ali passed away, or even if you didn't know him, John Madden passed away, even if you didn't know him, in my experience, I felt like I had a relationship with them because of what they meant to me when they were on TV. And that's why yesterday I got just punched in the gut when I saw that Bill Walton had passed away. And again, not to sit here and tell you that not to sit there and tell you like I'm the biggest Bill Walton expert of all time, but there were a lot of people yesterday who were absolutely shaken to the core about the passing of Bill Walton. I'm not saying I want everybody to be sad when I pass. I'm not saying that I want it to be, some sort of tragedy and everybody feels bad and everybody. I don't think that that's really how I want to be remembered. But I think it's pretty cool that Bill Walton was remembered with the reverence that he was yesterday and has been today. And I have that kind of reverence for Walton as well. And again, it happens as I get older, more people die. I believe Sinatra died like 90-something, and I remember, I think that's, like there was talk about, oh, yeah, Frank Sinatra passed away. I didn't know Frank Sinatra. But now, as I'm getting older, a lot of people that I watched on television, a lot of people that I watched play games, have passed away. And it really sucks. It's kind of a reminder of our own mortality as I see these things. But yesterday with Bill Walton, it was like, not Bill, not the greatest deliverer of life. But at the end of the day, that's a compliment. That's what Bill was. Again, Bill Walton, 71 years old, gone too soon. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. So I have an ESPN account. I'm sure many of you have an ESPN account now because you don't have to watch a couple of games a year. You got to get ESPN Plus. And so when you sign up for your ESPN account and everything else, it's like, okay, as I sign up for this account, who are my favorite teams? And I'm like, okay, the Titans, the Predators, the Braves. And so I get news on my little front page that is kind of Braves related, Preds related, Titans related, you name it. And so today there was a story, the Bill Barnwell AFC Superlatives. And I was like, okay, let's see at ESPN.com what they write about the Titans, what they have. You know, it's probably going to be bad because the national media thinks Titans suck. And you're right, it was. The superlative, according to ESPN.com, the Titans, the team most likely to talk itself into its starting quarterback breaking out after a few preseason snaps. Boy, what a backhanded comment that is. I'm not even going to say compliment because that's not a compliment. But again, it's like, oh yeah, these morons are so stupid that after a couple of practice reps, they'll see Levis throw the ball down the field, that they'll just fall in love with him. Barnwell writes, last year this might have been the Daniel Jones or Kenny Pickett superlative, given how those guys were slinging the ball around in camp with improved cores around them. Pickett went 13 for 15 for 199 yards and 2 touchdowns during the preseason and was inspiring whispers of MVP hype. Not on this show, it wasn't a whisper. We believed heading into his second season in Pittsburgh. Obviously, it didn't work out for either player. Barnwell says, my guess for the quarterback who gets this sort of hype after limited work in the preseason this year is Will Levis, who didn't show a lot in the snaps that mattered in 2023. And then he throws in, some of these numbers of he compiled 58.1% of his passes and averaged 7.1 yards per attempt while taking sacks on 9.9% of his dropbacks, even though those numbers were inflated by garbage time. His 29.1 QBR, which is situation adjusted, after taking over, ranked 30th out of 33 quarterbacks. Only Tommy DeVito, Bailey Zappi, and Trevor Siemian were worse. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to say the offensive line was terrible. That's not Levis's fault. The coaching was terrible. That's not Levis's fault. The receivers were not as good. That's not Levis's fault. This year, they have, we hope, fixed the coaching. They have somewhat patched up the offensive line and used real resources, not Andre Dillard in an 11th overall guard, and that they've gotten better receivers. But again, Bill Barnwell and the rest of the national media don't seem to care when it comes to Will Levis, what the Titans did or didn't do. Barnwell writes, Levis was basically a disaster when he was pressured. His 8.9 QBR ranked 28th, while his completion percentage over expected was minus 20.7%. Trevor Siemian was the only passer worse under pressure over the second half of the season by CPOE. The rookie second-round pick had one bright spot, his 4-touchdown debut against the Falcons, and was a mess afterwards. I did think that second-half comeback against Miami was pretty impressive. So, again, how much Titans is Bill Barnwell watching, and how much is the numbers say we got to do this, whatever. Here's what I'll say. When it comes to this idea that, hey, the Titans are, they're superlative. Their fans are so stupid. They're going to see a couple of throws in training camp and they're going to get all excited. Let me start first by saying this. I am done with getting excited about good things that happen in training camp. Because I don't think good things that happen in training camp are necessarily a reflection of what's going to happen during the season. And the reason I say this is because I saw Traylon Burks last year at training camp. I saw Chigakonkwo last year at training camp. I walked at training camp at the Titans defense. Kevin Byard's talking about how they think they could be the best defense in the league. It turned out their offense just actually sucked. That was the problem. Oh, yeah, they had no offensive line. No, make your defense look pretty good, won't it? So after the last 2 years, I've given up on spotting what's good in practice. Now, you can easily spot what's bad, right? Like I knew Caleb Farley, I'm like, he's terrible. Malik Willis, terrible. You can see that in practice. You can see bad. I called my dad after the third practice last year. I said, this offensive line is going to be horrendous. You can't spot good until you get into the games. So I'm not going to be one that's going to sit there and say, Levis had a 55-yard bomb today to Nick Westbrook-Akine in practice. Boy, Levis is looking. I'm not doing that. Mariota went X amount of passes as a rookie without throwing an interception. How'd that turn out? I remember when Racey McMath caught about 4 deep touchdowns 2 training camps ago. They happened to all be against Caleb Farley, and we all looked at it. I shouldn't say we all, because after the Tampa scrimmages, I was like, get Farley off the field. But everybody else looked at it like, Racey McMath is going to have a breakout season. So I don't do that anymore. And I will not fall into that trap this year. But I'm going to ask a second question, again, about the superlative that is an expectation that Will Levis is going to fail. Again, the superlative is that the Titans are the team most likely to get their fans excited by watching a couple of training camp snaps. And this is a question I'll probably ask 1,000 times before the start of the season. But why is nobody giving Will Levis a chance? I understand the idea of giving somebody who's never had success or somebody that doesn't have the ability to play quarterback in the NFL. I understand not giving them a chance, right? Like Bailey Zappi doesn't need a chance. He sucks. Mac Jones is the backup now in Jacksonville because he had a chance, and he failed. But Will Levis hasn't failed yet. So why is nobody giving him a chance to be good? I will say this every single day until we snap the ball in week 1, and that is I am right there in the middle on Levis. I can see this going either way. He is very talented. He's got a cannon of an arm. Everybody I've talked to that knows him, and remember, I used to be on the radio in Louisville, so I know people at Kentucky. They swear by his work ethic. Brian Callahan showed up, and he's just all in on Will Levis. But why is nobody outside of Nashville, why are they not giving him a chance to be good? Is it because he fell in the draft? Because Aaron Rodgers fell in the draft, and I think Aaron Rodgers has had a pretty good career. Lamar Jackson fell in the draft. And after Lamar Jackson's rookie year, he had one of the single worst playoff games of all time. Jalen Hurts went in the second round. And again, it's not like Will Levis showed that he couldn't do it last year. Again, he had a better rookie season than Bryce Young. And I don't see people sitting there calling Bryce Young a bust after 1 year, which I wouldn't do either. I do think Young is going to have a hard time succeeding because I think that the Panthers are a mess and I think their owner is a moron. But it's only been 1 year, and let's see what happens in year 2 with Bryce Young. But people are still giving Bryce Young the ability to be good. They still give him a chance. When it comes to Levis, there's no chance. It's just, oh, no, he sucks. And maybe you're right. Maybe he does suck. I don't know. But right now, there's nothing that tells you that Will Levis is awful. And here's what I would do. And again, I don't have the guru stats that Bill Barnwell has. You know, again, what was it he pulled up? CPOE, which is percentage completion, percentage over expected, or something like that. His CPOE was minus 20.7%. Now, I don't even know how you calculate that. But what was Ryan Tannehill's? Because the Titans won 6 games last year. Levis won 3, and Tannehill won 3. Now, I know everybody's decided Tannehill sucks, and he doesn't have a job, and I'm shocked that he doesn't. But I know in my heart Ryan Tannehill doesn't suck. Do I think Ryan Tannehill is a franchise quarterback? No. But again, I think Ryan Tannehill is probably a representation of a league average starting NFL quarterback. Right now, he'd be a great bridge guy. Give him $13 million. He starts the first 8 games, transition to the next guy. The one problem you may run into is he might win those games. Because if you give Tannehill a good team, he can win. And we all know that. So when we look at Levis and we say, well, he was sacked on 9.9% of his dropbacks, he sucks. I'm like, that's not really fair because Tannehill got murdered behind the same line. And if I had to bet my house today on one of those two guys to win me a game, I probably would bet on Tannehill. Just because he's more experienced, he can recognize defenses, and Levis is working there. But there is no potential for Ryan Tannehill to one day in the future be a great quarterback. There is a potential with Levis. And yet, it feels like every article I read, every assumption that is made is just that Will Levis is not good. Will Levis has no chance to be good. And it doesn't matter that the Titans went out and got an offensive coach. They went out and got the best offensive line coach of all time. They got 2 receivers. They went out and drafted a tackle, and they're actually going to let him play tackle this year, unlike the tackle they drafted last year. They signed a center to an ungodly amount of money. Like, can we give him the chance to be good? Do people not realize that C.J. Stroud benefited from the fact that he had a $30 million left tackle? Like, do people not understand that when we talk about the guru coaches, that C.J. Stroud has Bobby Slowick as his offensive coordinator, who was the right-hand man to Kyle Shanahan the year before in San Francisco? They played a game in New York. It rained. Not great for a quarterback. But Dalton Schultz was out, Nico Collins was out, and Tank Dell was out. And C.J. Stroud wasn't very good. And he got beat by Zach Wilson. So CJ's good when he's got his $30 million left tackle. He's good when he's got his starting tight end. He's got his receivers. He's got his... Because that's what has to happen for these young quarterbacks. But instead, we just, oh, yeah, he had a good season. He's good. Oh, yeah, his team sucks. He sucks. But again, Levis didn't have a terrible season. Levis did not... I mean, I don't understand how we can sit there and say, well, Anthony Richardson's in a better spot. He got hurt. He didn't play. I don't see how we can say Bryce Young's in a better spot. His team was the worst team in the league. And so I am not advocating for Levis. I am not a believer in Levis. I'm also not a doubter in Levis. I am right there in the middle, and this could go either way. I would love for Levis to be the guy. I would love for Levis to get $55 million a year. Don't know if he will. We shall see. But at the very least, I am giving Will Levis a chance. And I read these articles that are like, oh, yeah, Will Levis, he could be Kenny Pickett. And I'm like, I'm not sure you're really giving him a chance. Like, I'm not sure I'm giving him a chance. If you think the Titans are going to be bad, this is what I would say. Again, the whole article was AFC superlatives. If you think the Titans are going to be bad, and most people outside of the city of Nashville do, to me the superlative is the March champion goes 4-13. Because it does look like on paper the Titans were the March champions. Though Houston did spend a boatload of money. The Titans weren't the only team that spent a boatload of money. But that would be the bigger thing. Not this, oh no, these Titan fans are so stupid. They're going to get excited by a few preseason snaps and think they have the guy. One, let's not do that. But two, everyone's just assuming Levis is going to stink. And I just don't think that's, I'm not going to say fair because life's not fair. I just don't think it's right. Because I don't think, there's nothing that I saw that made me think, you know what? This guy blows. There's nothing I saw. Were there mistakes that were made last year? Absolutely. That ball against the Texans, where Hopkins and Burks were on the left side, and Levis rolled out, and the two guys stayed with Hopkins, and Burks was running free down the sideline, and he threw the ball to Hopkins, and it got intercepted. That was a mistake. There was a ball at the end of the first half against the Steelers where he threw for Tajay Spears, and he missed him, and Spears got turned around and fell down. That was a mistake. But every rookie makes mistakes. The question is, can he come back from them? And to me, he didn't do anything that makes me think he can't. So I just think the narrative surrounding Levis is incredibly unfair. And it'd be one thing if you gave that same narrative to Anthony Richardson or the same narrative to Bryce Young, but they're not. Young gets the benefit of the doubt because he was the first pick in the draft. So was Tim Couch. And Richardson gets the benefit of the doubt because he was hurt. Again, it's not a good thing. When you're 21 years old, in Richardson's case, he's going to be 23 this year. It is not a good thing that he has played like 17 games as a starting quarterback in his life. But they don't drag those guys down like they do Levis. And I just don't think it's right. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. So, there's one really, really, really big concern that I have, and I mean really big, and I'm not going to stop talking about it, and it is a problem. And while everybody just keeps talking about these wide receivers that the Titans got, I am really nervous that it may not matter. And we'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063 The Game. Hey, you can...
for us the draft started at 5 at the Chargers. And then you get to a spot where you're like, okay, we have 3 guys, over these next 3 picks that we're good with any one of these 3. We don't have to make any sudden moves to jump up, that it's going to cost us in the future. And so it was a waiting game. We done enough research to know that the Chargers were going tackle. Mm-hmm. And so you sit there and you're like, okay, which one? And then you start playing they got Rashawn Slater at left tackle. So I could see JC going because he's played right tackle. Right. You know what I mean? But then you're like, well, the Chargers were at the pro day, at Joe Alt's pro day. And you start hearing like they really like him. And so you're like, yeah, I could see that too. So you start trying to, you do that part. But then you got to take it a step further because the Giants are right below you. Mm-hmm. And you're like, well, the Giants have, drafted pretty well on the O-line and they got some guys. But it's like, all right, well, what if one of the tackles, say whoever they take, whether JC or Joe, but what if the Giants decide we're going to take tackle? Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, then that pushes one of the other guys to us, and we got to be comfortable with that. So we work all those scenarios.
That was Rand Carthon on Buzzing with the Boys. And I think between that and another podcast that Brian Callahan's done, the Titans made it incredibly clear that they were probably going to take Joe Alt. If it wasn't Joe Alt, it was going to be Malik Neighbors or J.C. Latham. That whoever the Giants took, or whoever they didn't take with the 6th pick, they were going to take with the 7th pick. Now, maybe it would have been a curveball if the Giants had taken Olu Fashanu or Roma Dunze or something like that. But it seems to me like the Titans had Alt and Latham ranked pretty similarly, and it was like, okay, well, Ty goes to the runner for the guy that plays left tackle and flips the other side. The one thing that I'm still nervous about when it comes to the Titans, I saw Pro Football Talk today had a big discussion about how good are the Titans receivers? Are they the top third, middle third? By the way, they voted middle third, which I'm sure will anger a lot of you guys. But the one thing that I guess I kind of walked away from all this chatter about everybody wanting to talk wide receivers is I'm still nervous about the offensive line. And, I know that you guys don't want to be nervous about the offensive line because you guys just don't want to relive the same pain that we've lived the last 2 years, and it has been painful over the last 2 years. And I know Bill Callahan's in the mix, and so there's a large percentage of everybody out there that's like, in Bill Callahan we trust. But let me just say this. Until I see those right tackle Scarbinis actually play right tackle and play it well, I am not going to be comfortable. Maybe Bill Callahan is Jesus Christ, and maybe he can turn water into wine. But I need to see it. I can't just say, oh, okay, yeah, he's got a great reputation. All right, go put Jalen Duncan out there, the single worst offensive lineman in the NFL last year. Go put him out there. He'll be fine. I got PK lecturing me, saying, well, didn't you want to get an experienced offensive line coach? Yeah, to pick the new offensive lineman, not to roll back the same old crap. And so I feel great about Lloyd Cushenberry. And I'm giving Peter Skoronski the benefit of the doubt because he'll have some good coaching. But before we get too excited about the wide receivers, it's like, can we talk about are we just all saying, okay, line's fine? Because I'm not there. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Weston has been waiting patiently and is going to kick us off this hour. Thank you for calling. What's up, Weston?
Hey, Jared. Just wanted to talk about Will Levis, and noticing him last year, he was put in a situation that he still has some good pieces around him. No, the line wasn't perfect. I am worried about the line going into this year, but Carthon wouldn't have put him out there if he didn't think he was ready. And I feel confident in him being able to lose those games, having Henry, having Tannehill to learn from, and having those pieces, I think is going to make a big difference.
Can I ask you a question, though? You just said that you don't think Rand Carthon would have put him out there if he wasn't ready. So do you think that Malik Willis was ready because they put him out there?
I think the reason Willis was out there is because they weren't sure of Levis yet, and he still had the injury coming out of Kentucky, and I think they gave it time for that to fully heal before they made that decision.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. I mean, it sounds good. Thank you, Weston. It sounds good, but I don't think that's true. I mean, I think the Titans, this is what I think happened last year. And again, they'll never tell you because that's how they operate, especially Vrabel. I think the Titans, at training camp, it was close between the two. We were in Minnesota, and I was pulling everybody on the sidelines. I was like, hey, Levis or Willis right now. And almost everybody except for me said Willis. I was Levis. To me, I thought, a little bit of an edge to Levis, and he's the younger guy, so I'm going to give the guy with the less experience, I'm going to put him a bump up. And he got hurt in Minnesota, and he didn't play in that preseason game, and he didn't play in the third preseason game. And when Willis threw for 85 yards, taking every snap in a preseason game, I'm like, this guy sucks. But the Titans, I think, thought, well, Malik's got some game experience, so if we have to put a guy in there, let's let it be Malik, and let's not throw Will out there and get him killed when he's never taken an NFL snap before outside of that one Chicago game. And quite frankly, I think the Titans wasted time last year giving Malik Willis those reps in that Bears game. Now, they didn't know Levis was going to get hurt, but it happened. Then they put Willis in the Baltimore game, and they realized it makes no sense to play him. There is no reason to put him out there. So then they decided, well, let's go ahead and see what the other guys got. But I don't think it was like a Rand Carthon. They waited until he was ready. I don't think they waited until he was ready. I think they waited until Ryan Tannehill got hurt, and they realized Malik Willis doesn't belong in the NFL. Malik Willis, and it's too bad the NFL doesn't have this, but these spring leagues that are going on right now, the UFL, the XUF, whatever the hell it's called, Malik should be playing quarterback in one of those. And I wish the NFL had like a loan service to those teams where like each NFL team could loan like 6 guys to the UFL, and those 6 guys could get those kind of reps. So a guy that missed reps, a guy like Anthony Richardson, if you're the Colts, would you want him taking reps in minor league football because he didn't play last year? I don't know. Kyle is up next here on our program. Thank you for calling and waiting. What's up, Kyle?
Hey, Jared. I got a question for you after I talk about Levis. But with Levis, I really think we have a chance to take the division with him taking another step. And you know me, I really believe in him. With these receivers, I'm also looking at the DBs in this division, and I'm not very impressed.
I heard you call the morning show and say the same thing.
Well, yeah, I got hung up on or something like that. I don't know. I lost service.
Well, I'll just tell it to you right this. I will tell it to you like this. Here's what worries me about the rest of the division. I don't care about the DBs. Thank you for your call, Kyle. I don't care about the DBs. I care about the pass rushers. Because the Colts drafted Laiatu Latu in the first round. Laiatu Latu is the best pass rusher in this year's draft, but he's got a major red flag with the neck injury. He was told at Washington that he was going to have to retire from football before he transferred to UCLA. Well, if Laiatu Latu hits, now Indy's got a legit guy, Jacksonville has Josh Allen, and Houston has Will Anderson. And that scares me. The Texans have Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, and Danico Autry. That should scare you. And again, if you said, hey, you can have the best corner in the NFL or the best pass rusher, it is not a question as to who I would take. So as much as I don't know who's playing corner for the Jags. I don't know. But I know Josh Allen just signed for a bunch of money, and he's going to be coming after the quarterback. And as I have pointed out many times on this program, the Titans don't have a right tackle. And so I don't exactly know what, they're going to do if that becomes an issue or not. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. I read a story in The Athletic yesterday. It was actually about the Dallas Stars. And yet, as somebody who doesn't care about the Dallas Stars, it drove me bananas And I do want to talk about that, so we'll do that next. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, not Hiller. I love Hiller. We'll talk about them later. Twice Daily. That's right. I love Twice Daily. In fact, I was at Twice Daily this weekend. I'm like, we were going out on the lake, and I wanted to stop by. I wanted to pick up lunch on the way, and the best way to do that is with Twice Daily. And because I have the Twice Daily app, I can order ahead on my phone, and they had a nice little, buy one, get one offer going on over there. It was great. Twice Daily has your cravings, and you can save on every visit. Stop in and get rewarded. All you need to do is join the Twice Daily Rewards program to unlock special discounts, savings, enter their sweepstakes, and so much more. Try the new wraps at Twice Daily, the Italian, the ham and cheddar, the turkey and Swiss, and the Nashville hot chicken. They're made to order with your favorite toppings, and when you download the Twice Daily app, you can order ahead. At Twice Daily, it's snack time all the time, and they've got favorites like chicken fingers, tater rounds, new pretzels, and more. Twice Daily. What are you craving?
If you want to be the worst team, it doesn't mean you're getting the best player. There's no guarantees. And, I look at organization like there's a couple of organizations in the NHL have been in a rebuild for a dozen years. I don't feel that was ever necessary. I think there's good enough players, and we're in a good enough situation as an organization and a destination that we can we can find our ways with different navigation and, be the worst team, get the best player, and try to rebuild for 8 or 10 years.
I said after the season was over, like, look, guys, I'm not tanking. Like, we're not doing that. And not that the Predators were ever really in a position to do it because Yossi and Forsberg both have no movement clauses. But there's this belief that, hey, if you want McDavid, if you want Bedard, if you want Crosby, Kane, if you want that player, you have to suck. Celebrini is the guy this year. Apparently he's supposed to be, the next sliced bread. And you've got to be that bad in order to get that pick, in order to be that good. And Barry Trotz is like, I don't think you have to do that. And I agree. But I read a story in The Athletic over the weekend. It was a great story about the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars right now are up 2-1 in the Western Conference Final. They may go back to the Stanley Cup Final. I think they were there the year of the bubble. They made it to the Cup Final. They were in the Conference Final a year before. And the story basically outlined how when Dallas felt like they were getting to the point that, whoa, we need a reset, they were able to pull themselves out of it without having to tank. And their whole logic, their GM said in this story, was like, in Dallas, you cannot tear your team down and tank for 4 years. Nobody in Dallas will care about the Dallas Stars if we do that. Hell, I would love to listen to Dallas Sports Radio today and hear how much they're actually talking about the Dallas Stars. Or if it's all just wall-to-wall Mavericks and the Cowboys have a little OTAs. Let's get into that. So in Dallas, they can't rebuild, or else they're not going to sell any tickets. So they decided, hey, we're going to have to do this on the fly. And the moral of the story is they did. They had a core of veterans, Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, we know them very well. And then they supplemented them with youngsters that are actually good, like Miro Heiskanen, Roope Hintz, Jason Robertson, Wyatt Johnson. I mean, they went out and drafted good players and put them in the NHL, and they're good now, and they're third liners, first D pairs. Their goalie was a high draft choice in 27. The year you got Ellie Tolvanen, they drafted Miro Heiskanen, Jake Ottinger, and Jason Robertson. Again, you got Ellie Tolvanen, which is exactly what grinded my gears and made me jealous at the same time that I read this story, as I was thinking, man, that is a really good job of drafting by the Dallas Stars. And I was sitting there thinking, I was actually sitting by a pool yesterday reading this story on my phone, and I'm like, so the Dallas Stars are drafting all these good players, and these good players are playing in the NHL playoffs, and these good players are making a difference in the NHL playoffs, and these players are scoring in the NHL playoffs. Where are the guys the Predators are drafting? Like, why are the Predators not drafting any good players to come up and help the NHL team? But Jared, all the guys they've drafted right now are in Milwaukee, and the Admirals are winning playoff games, and they're right. So Dallas is drafting guys that are helping them in the NHL playoffs. But I should be excited about the Predators drafting guys that aren't good enough to make the team for the NHL playoffs, but they're good enough to help you in the AHL playoffs. Wow! Way to go, baby! AHL. Yeah, you can take your NHL playoffs and you can shove it. And I looked at, again, it's the 17 draft, the 19 draft, the 21 draft. How many core players do you need to get out of a draft? Every NHL team, for the most part, has one or two good veteran core players. They have, Seguin and Benn. You've got Yossi and Forsberg. How many core players do you get out of the recent drafts? In 17, Dallas got 3. In 19, they used the 19. And Stankoven, 47th. So at the same time, you drafted Tolvanen at 30. He's on another team. They drafted Jason Robertson, who had a hat trick last night in the NHL playoffs, not the AHL playoffs. they drafted Jason Robertson 39th. 2019, they drafted Hartley at 19. You drafted Tomasino 24th, and Tomasino can't crack the NHL lineup. Great AHL player, not a good NHL player. And in 2021, they drafted Wyatt Johnson 23rd. You drafted Fedor Svechkov 19th. Now, Svechkov might end up being good. I don't know. But at the same time, he's in the AHL playoffs, and Wyatt Johnson is good, and he is in the NHL playoffs. And they took their second pick in that draft, who is also on the same line with Wyatt Johnson and Stankoven. They took him 47th, and you took Zachary Leroux 27th. So what is the difference here? Like, why are the Dallas Stars able to draft guys? Like, look, you never would have been able to get Miro Heiskanen because you were in the Stanley Cup final that year, so you were picking 30th. So I'm going to give you a pass on that. But again, what is the difference between the way the Dallas Stars draft and the way you draft? And I don't know the answer to this. But Barry Trotz inherited David Poyle's operation. In fact, I think that's part of the reason why David Poyle was so willing to do it, was because it was like, hey, when you go, you're going to be handing off the infrastructure of the organization that you built. You're going to be handing off that to Barry, and Barry is going to fine-tune it and make some tweaks and make it the Barry Trotz way, but he's not going to blow it up. You go hire somebody from Vancouver's organization, they're going to come and blow it up. So Barry Trotz takes over, and I'm wondering, like, is there a problem with the Predators scouting department? You know, they had those guys get up there and do that press conference a couple weeks ago about the draft. And in hindsight, I'm looking at it thinking, how come outside of Luca Evangelista, the Predators drafts have not yielded one core player outside of Evangelista since 2017? Well, Jared, Kimmel might be that guy. Wood might be that guy. Mullendijk might be that guy. Askarov might be that guy. But they're not right now. And the Dallas Stars have, again, 6 guys since 2017 that are legitimate impact players on a team that is in the Western Conference Final. And then I think back to the drafting, and I'm like, man, it's been trash. Like, it's been really bad. And I'm sick and tired of waiting on some of these young guys that, you know, again, Afanasiev, he's been down in Milwaukee for like 8 years. I don't know if he's any good or not. But if he was good, he'd be up at the NHL, right? So I read this story in The Athletic, and I'm like, okay, if the Dallas Stars can do this, if the Dallas Stars can look in the mirror and say, hey, we cannot do this. We cannot rebuild on the fly. We cannot tank, so we're going to rebuild on the fly. In order to do that, you have to draft well. You have to draft well, you have to trade well. I think you've done an okay job trading. I don't think you've done a great job, but I think you've done an okay job trading. But at some point, like, you got to draft guys that are helping the NHL team. I don't give a rat's ass about the AHL team. Nobody gives a rat's ass about the AHL team, except for a very tiny portion of the Predators fan base and Willie. And I love Willie, but he cares. Outside of that, nobody else cares about what you do in the AHL playoffs. So instead of, I don't want to hear the talk about how the Milwaukee Admirals are doing. I don't want to hear that. Because when somebody says, well, you know, Johnny, he's doing well in the AHL, great. Is he going to be in the NHL? Well, you know, we don't know, and I don't care then. Because Dallas is drafting guys that are playing in the NHL playoffs. That's what I want. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phone. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company. We continue along. 1025, 1063 The Game.
Dallas still keeps possession. Robertson in deep, baked it, he scored! A hat-trick goal! Robertson outweighted Skinner, looked for a window, banked it off him and in. And with 8:06 to go, Robertson's hat trick gives Dallas the 4-3 lead. Fought for, Stars come away with it, play it towards the empty net and in. It's Miro Heiskanen from the defensive circle.
There you go. That was the Dallas Stars last night. They take a 2-1 lead in that Western Conference Series. I don't know how much I care about it. I don't want Dallas to win. It has nothing to do with Matt Duchene. I don't care about him. I just don't like the Dallas Stars. But I will say this. I give them credit. They draft players that play in the NHL playoffs, and the Predators are too busy drafting players to brag about what they're doing in the AHL playoffs. And I cannot handle that anymore. And I do think, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to try to put this as nice as possible, as nicely as possible. I don't want to say it's a culture problem, but I do think it's a little bit of a loser's mentality. Like I heard the midday show sitting there, recapping the Milwaukee Admirals playoff series as they get ready to take on Coachella Valley, which I don't even know what team that is. I don't even know where that is. I'm sure it's in California because that's where that Coachella Festival is or whatever. But I have no idea what, and I don't care, so don't tell me. But they're like recapping, and then this game, and then this guy scored, and then this guy, and I'm like, oh, great. Great. Minor leagues. And I think it's kind of like a culture that I think probably came from David Poile that is like, hey, the minor league success matters. And I'm here to tell you right now that I don't give one poop about the Milwaukee Admirals or minor league success or anything like that. And the deep playoff runs the Admirals have had over the last 2 years have been mostly ignored because most people do not care about minor league sports. But I think the Predators as an organization care about how the Admiral, they care that the Admirals are winning games. Not the, hey, LaRue's doing this, and Svechkov's doing that, and Askarov's doing this, and Kimmel's doing it. No. They care, even the old pawpaws that are on the team just because, and the organizational filler. It's like, no, yes, go team, go. And I'm like, no, we don't care about that. That's loser talk to worry about that. To be excited about the Milwaukee team is like trying to fill a void because your team isn't playing anymore, and I want to develop good players so that my team will still be playing right now. I joked with somebody that the Milwaukee Admirals is like your imaginary friend when you were a kid. Oh, hey, does imaginary friend Johnny want to come over for dinner tonight? That's how I view the Milwaukee Admirals. I don't care. But I think it's like inside the organization that they have convinced themselves that matters. And I take a guy like Tomasino. Andrew Burnett hates Philip Tomasino. He made it abundantly clear at his end-of-the-year press conference. But he's the kind of guy that's out there doing things in the AHL playoff. Well, he's never going to matter for the Predators. So I'm not going to get excited about that. I used to tell people, do Preds prospects on your own time. Well, now they've got so many prospects, it's like, okay, we're going to make a decision on the goalie here. But to me, that's just a little different. It's like, get these boys up to the NHL, and then let's go from there. 615-737-1025. I asked the question, why can the Dallas Stars draft guys who play in the NHL and the Predators can't? Somebody says, David Poile. That's the easy answer. Well, maybe. But what I would say about, again, Poile is there's two things about Poile that I would highlight when it comes to the drafting. The first is, do the Predators need a new scouting system? Do they need a new scouting staff? Or were they just making bad choices? The scouting staff said, hey, Tolvanen's not going to be able to play in your top six on a consistent basis. He's not going to be strong enough in his own end. He's not going to be any of those things. But take him anyways? They need to, and I know that we evaluate everything all the time. They need to evaluate the scouting staff because they're not getting enough players out of the drafts into the NHL. That is a problem. The second thing with Poile is, do you notice who's doing all the winning in the Western Conference? It's not like it's one team that's doing all the winning in the Western Conference, but it is one guy that wins a lot in the Western Conference, and his name is Peter DeBoer. And Peter DeBoer won a lot at San Jose, and he won a lot at Vegas, and he's winning at Dallas. And the biggest problem with Peter DeBoer, it seems, I've never covered the guy, I don't know Peter DeBoer, but it seems like he's kind of like Laviolette. He's kind of an a-hole. And I think that eventually DeBoer pisses enough people off and he gets fired, and then he goes somewhere else and he wins a bunch, just like Laviolette. And when David Poyle decided to hire John Hines, Peter DeBoer was sitting out there and they didn't even consider it. And that's the kind of stuff where I'm like, if you worry about your minor league team and you hire loser coaches and you're not going to win. And that's all I'm worried about right now is winning. So I'm not going to just throw Poyle under the bus for all these draft picks not working out or not having worked out yet. But I am going to say that, if all these guys end up being minor league guys and occasional call-ups and only Evangelista pops as a true regular, then you've got to evaluate your scouting staff. It seems like the LaRue kid will be up next year. And if he's not up next year, I'm going to have a problem with it. The other thing, too, by the way, is I do believe that this is in the Predators' culture, and I don't think Barry Trotz is going to change, but I do wonder if looking at the Dallas Stars maybe makes him think that he would, and if he would, he might do it with Mullendijk. But they don't sit there and just leave their kids at Milwaukee or the AHL for 10 years. Like this idea that, Skarov's not ready, we need to let him back up for 3 years. They don't do that. They get you in the NHL. And maybe that ruins some guys' development. Maybe it's good for other guys' development, but again, it's not doing me any good that the Milwaukee Admirals are winning games. And I know, cook them in the minors, but the Dallas Stars aren't doing that. And the Dallas Stars, again, they just seem to keep winning. One texter says, you keep talking about the Predators organization. Why don't you just watch to wait and see what Barry Trotz goes out and gets? Because I want to win. I want to win. I don't want to hope that I can win one day. I want to win. I don't just want to sit by the window and say, all right, 200 days until training camp next year for the Predators. So right now we'll just sit by the window and wait for Barry Trotz to go out and get some more players and get some more. No, I want to win. And I think a lot of people around here want to win too. And I would say this, again, the Dallas general manager was pretty blunt with The Athletic. He said, in Dallas, you can't tank because nobody in Dallas will care if you do that. I think we might be the same way. Now, I did back tanking when it was an option because I thought this organization desperately needed it. But Dallas seems like the model for me that you can probably build upon. But again, they develop really good players, and their players score in the NHL playoffs, and your players score in the AHL playoffs. 615-737-1025. Tom Brady was on Colin Cowherd yesterday, working on Memorial Day. I tell you that, Tom Brady. Tom Brady was on there, and he preached, and I was the congregation yesterday. And I could not have gotten up fast enough to say, amen, especially when it comes to Will Levis. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios. Trevor in 30 minutes, OTAs tomorrow. So yesterday, I was pleased to see that Colin Cowherd was on TV, and he said, Tom Brady going to join us on the program. If you know me, you know that I'm not missing Tom Brady when he's going to sit down and do the interview. Now, I have no idea if Brady's going to be any good calling the games on Fox. I'm rooting for him. I have no idea what to think. We shall see. But you guys know I love Tom Brady. You guys know I believe in Tom Brady. Tom Brady is gospel to me. When I listened to Brian Callahan sit down with Bussin' with the Boys, and he talked about how he went and used clips from the Man in the Arena documentary to motivate the Bengals, I was like, that's my guy. Because I was watching that documentary, I was like, oh, my God, yes, this, I believe in that. I believe in this, I believe in that. Loved every second of it. So Brady was on with Cowherd, and he was asked about why quarterbacks succeed, fail, whatever. And here's what Tom Brady said, because, again, the Titans have a young quarterback just like a third of the league has a young quarterback. There were 5 quarterbacks who were drafted last year that are probably going to start this year. Between the 3 in the first round, Levis and Aiden O'Connell. And there were 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round this year. So that is a lot of young quarterbacks that are in the NFL right now. So Brady was asked, how do you make these young quarterbacks, how do they become successful? And here's what Tom Brady said.
Everyone asks me all the time around the draft, pre-draft, which of these kids is going to be the most successful? There's 2 answers. 1, it's up to them. And 2 is show me the people that are around them and are helping to develop them. It's not necessarily about someone's physical potential all the time. So much of it is about, can you retain information? Can you process it? Can you use the information? Are you willing to study and go through the intricate details of the game like Drew Brees was, like Peyton Manning was, like Phillip Rivers was, like some of the all-time great John Elway was, some of the all-time great quarterbacks were. You could be very physically talented. You could absolutely go to the wrong fit and have a coach instruct you to do things that are almost impossible to do.
Right.
You can't assume that what these young athletes are being told, that every coach is the same. Some coach may have one perspective, another coach may have another perspective.
Okay, Brady told you it's 2 things. 1, can you do it? Like, can you handle the position physically? Can you handle the position mentally? We know how hard it is to play quarterback. And with Levis, we don't know if Levis can do it. From a physical standpoint, I don't know if Levis can stay healthy. And from the mental standpoint, now Brian Callahan seems very encouraged by this, about his ability to learn something in the classroom and take it to the grass. But he hasn't seen it in a game yet. So, we talk about, the game will slow down for Levis. We don't know that. Will it? That's the quarterback side of it. Some guys aren't smart enough to play the position. Some guys like Vince Young are too lazy to play the position and play it well. Some guys like Marcus Mariota, may not be tough enough to play the position. But then there's a second part of this that Tom Brady lays out about why he was successful.
Why was I fortunate? Because I came into the Patriots when Bill Belichick was there. He's the one that helped develop me. Charlie Weiss was there. He helped develop me. Later in my career, Josh McDaniels was there. He helped develop me. I could not have been the player I was without people like that impacting my career. My first year, I had Drew Bledsoe to look up to.
Yeah.
He took all the reps. I got to sit there from behind and watch him every single day. I had a real mentor to look up to in Drew. So some of these teams, and you look at Jordan Love, who he had Aaron Rodgers to watch. That's the best type of training, in my opinion. Watch someone else do it at a very high level and then try to emulate them.
That's what Brady's saying. Like, look, you got to put the quarterback in the right spot. And a lot of these quarterbacks, they're just rushing them out there, go play, go get in, go. The reality of the NFL is this. Quarterback success is more nurtured than it is natured. Rick Spielman came out with a list 2 years ago before the 23 draft, and it was, as prospects, ranking guys over the last handful of years. And he had Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence and some of those guys ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. He had Anthony Richardson ahead of those guys as prospects. And the point Spielman made at the time was Mahomes had holes in his game. But when he got to Kansas City, he sat on the bench. Who was there in Kansas City? Maybe the best offensive coach of the era? Oh, yeah, the best tight end in the NFL, the fastest wide receiver in the NFL. It matters. And the reality is the majority of coaches in the NFL are not Andy Reid. Most of them are stupid. You are more likely to have an Adam Gase or a Todd Downing than you are to have an Andy Reid or a Kyle Shanahan. I mean, I keep going back to Kenny Pickett. Is Kenny Pickett a total bum? Or was Mike Tomlin a defensive coach who never developed a quarterback in his life because he inherited Ben Roethlisberger and he stuck him with bozo Matt Canada? We'll never know the answer to that. So I vehemently believe when it comes to Levis, like, hey, whether or not he's going to make it is dependent upon the two things that Tom Brady said. One, can he do it? Physically, talent-wise, he can do it. As far as being able to throw the ball, fit it into tight windows, layer the football, which he got better at. He's athletic. He's got a cannon. He can do it. Now, can he stay healthy? That's a big question we don't know the answer to. But then the second part of that equation is, did they put enough around him? Did they put enough coaching around him? Did they put enough receiver help around him? Did they put the offensive line around him? See, I vehemently believe, I had a texter text in last hour that said, this is all revisionist history, Jared. You didn't like Levis. You thought Levis should say, yeah. No. I liked Levis coming out. I didn't love him. I loved Richardson. I liked Levis. And what did I say? The first thing I would do if I was the coach and we drafted Anthony Richardson or we drafted Will Levis, the first thing I would do is I'd go downstairs and I'd say Ryan Tannehill is the starting quarterback. The same way Andy Reid said Alex Smith is the starting quarterback. The same way Floyd Reese said Steve McNair sitting the bench for 2 years. I would have done that. Because I believe that unless you're Joe Burrow or Peyton Manning, you probably need to sit. Now, older guys like Bo Nix, who was in college for 15 years, Bo, we can go ahead and put him out there. And so that takes me to Levis. Are the Titans in a good enough spot? Have they surrounded him well enough in order for him to succeed? So that whether or not he becomes a franchise quarterback is completely and totally dependent on him. On one hand, I feel really good about the guru coach. Again, I told you that's what this league's doing. This league is going out. This league is saying, hey, get the guru coach. Get McVay. Get Shanahan. Get McDaniel. Get Zach Taylor. Get Matt LaFleur. Get Kevin O'Connell. Get these guys, the gurus. Brian Callahan is a guru. At wide receiver. Now, I don't think it's as rosy as everybody makes the wide receiver position of the Titans out to be. Everybody talks about the wide receiver position of the Titans like it's the Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, as Hakeem Rams, which I'm not convinced it is. And I would really like there to be a young guy in this mix for Levis that he can kind of grow with, because Tyler Boyd's not going to be here for 5 years. DeAndre Hopkins not going to be here for 5 years. Calvin Ridley is probably not going to be here for 5 years. But as of right now, and again, Brady's first year, he didn't have Rob Gronkowski. He didn't have Deion Branch. He didn't have Wes Welker or Julian Edelman. So it was a good thing that he had David Patton, David Givens, Troy Brown, those guys that bring him along. They were kind of in their 30s. So quarterback, coach, I think I'll give it a check mark. We've never seen him call a game, never seen him call a play. But I think that they're in the right direction with the guru coach there. Wide receivers, I think they're in the right position there, though, again, I would like to see kind of a young guy that Levis can grow with. Tight end, I don't know. And then offensive line. We don't know that the left tackle is going to be a for sure thing. We don't know that the left guard's any good or not. Center, solid. And they don't have a right tackle. They do have Bill Callahan, which I like, but these are the things that matter. If this kid's going to pop, these are the things that matter. And Levis got the hell beat out of him last year. You know, one thing that we haven't brought up is how much damage was done last year by the Vrabel coaching staff, how much damage was done by that terrible offensive line. How Levis got hurt twice last year. Is Levis going to go out there this year and after his first big hit be like, whoa, whoa, whoa? I don't know the answer to that. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phone, 615-737-1025. Plus, Tom Brady believes the same thing I believe about rookie quarterbacks. And it was an opportunity the Titans blew last year with bad management. And I do wonder how much of a problem this is going to be. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025 is our phone number, Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game. Let's talk about Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. The peak summer temperatures are not here yet, but they are coming, and you know it. So get those home systems taken care of now. Have you ever had a contractor come to your house and you feel like it takes forever? Yes. And you feel like you've wasted your entire day. Well, that doesn't happen when you call Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. You do not have to camp out all day waiting. So be a happy camper this month. That's right, because they've got great specials. This is why I love using Hiller at my home. This is why I think they just do a fabulous job. They got great offers all the time that you guys can take great advantage of. For example, you can be a happy camper with 0% interest financing for 24 months on select HVAC systems, generators, and tankless water heaters, or take advantage of Hiller's $99 drain cleaning special. Take care of those home systems before the peak summer temperatures hit. Visit happyhiller.com today for details. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Hiller, call the Happy Face Truck today.
Maybe a little bit of the misnomer with the draft is that these players can come in and all of a sudden become this great professional player before they've really had the training and the development. And it was rare for quite a while for rookie quarterbacks to come in and play. Maybe if you're the first overall pick, but not if you're a second rounder, a third rounder. You had a chance to be groomed. Well, we're not allowing them to do that much anymore. Now we're throwing them out there. Let's see what you can do. And it's a really challenging thing if I was a young quarterback in this day and age to go out there with the pressure of the agents and the families, the schools, the social media, the fans, the coaches, the owner. How do these kids live up to that? I think it's a real challenge for these young quarterbacks. Hopefully they go into a system that can embrace them, that can fit and mold who they are. Hopefully they have coaches around them that can develop them in the best possible way.
Tom Brady on Colin Cowherd. By the way, let me say this. It was about a 20-minute interview, and I found it to be incredibly insightful from Tom Brady. It makes me think Brady's going to be a pretty good broadcaster. You know, for one, Cowherd played a cut of Brady talking to, I believe it was a bunch of rookies. And he was talking about how, like, hey, in football, this all about me, social media stuff, that's not going to get you anywhere. Football is about the team. And if you want to have success, you have to invest in the team. And Cowherd asked him about that, and Brady said, look, I did an event for Michigan years ago, and they were treating National Signing Day like the NFL draft and celebrating these high school football players. And I'm like, oh, my God, it's so true. So it's a very insightful interview, but he talks about, again, he thinks, hey, these rookie quarterbacks, like, they'll stick them all out there now. Go get them, Johnny. And if you've listened to this show, you know that I don't believe in that. Now, again, Joe Burrow, different story. Peyton Manning, different story. But not everybody's Joe Burrow and not everybody's Peyton Manning. And I do think that the Titans, you know, everybody's giving the Titans all this credit for all the additions they've made this offseason. But I do wonder how much the bad decisions they made last year will haunt them in the future. Because even though Aaron Brewer's gone, Andre Dillard's gone, banking on Burks and Chig gone, there's still kind of the remnants of what happened last year that put Will Levis on the field, maybe before he was ready to play, maybe when it would have been better off for him to sit behind Ryan Tannehill. And instead, Levis went out there and he got hurt twice last season. And I do wonder how much of what happened last year is going to have a negative effect on this year. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Jared Goff had a very similar rookie year, kind of scenario that Will Levis had, where he was on the bench for half the year, then they put him in there, and Jeff Fisher was the coach. Maybe that's what happens with Levis. But I really thought the Titans had an opportunity last year because, again, I believe in sitting young quarterbacks. Tom Brady, he said it yesterday on Cowherd. I got to learn from Drew Bledsoe. I'm looking up to Drew. I'm watching how Drew operates every day. I think that's really important. Patrick Mahomes sat behind Alex Smith. Aaron Rodgers sat behind Brett Favre. Jordan Love sat behind Aaron Rodgers. Lamar Jackson sat for half the year behind Joe Flacco. Now, look, Josh Allen played right away, and they really brought him along slowly. But I do wonder if the mistakes that were made last year still will have an effect this year. Will Levis be scared to death back there in week 1 against Chicago? Because last year, every time he said hike, there were 4 guys that were about to kill him. And on 2 separate occasions against the Texans, they did. Now, I don't think Levis is scared, but I think any quarterback, if they get hit too much, they become scared. I saw Mahomes play a game at Nissan Stadium in 2021, and this is Patrick freaking Mahomes. And I saw a game that he played that 2021 season where on the first third down of the game, and this was while they were adjusting the offensive line on the fly. You know, Andy Reid rebuilt the offensive line in one offseason on the fly, and this is while they were doing it and working out the kinks. And they played a game in October at Nissan Stadium. And Bud Dupree on the first third down of the game fired off the edge and strip sacked Mahomes. And I was like, if this is what Bud Dupree is going to bring the Titans, this totally changes the story. Because at this point, Harold Landry hadn't been hurt. Jeffrey Simmons was Jeffrey Simmons. Danico Autry was as consistent as he's always been. And now here comes Bud Dupree. And there was a play in that game where Greg Maben was covering Tyreek Hill. Who? And I'm sitting in my seats and I'm watching Tyreek Hill run wide open down the field. And I'm waiting for Mahomes to deliver the ball for a touchdown. And I look down, and I have to turn my head to go see the pocket. And I turn my head, and Mahomes is looking at the rush. He can't even see Tyreek. So if that's going to happen to Patrick Mahomes, what's going to happen to Will Levis? I mean, there are a lot of guys that play behind bad offensive lines that had a lot of talent, like David Carr or Tim Couch, and they just got the hell beat out of them, and they were never the same after that. And last year, everything was in place for it to go perfectly, right? Tannehill plays the season. Levis is behind him. Levis watches Tannehill. Then you make the transition. But then that goes out the window the second month of the season when Tannehill gets hurt, which was inevitable with that horrible offensive line against Baltimore. And so instead of Levis getting to see how it was done, it's, all right, get out there behind that horrible offensive line with those horrible coaches. And I will also say I think the Titans made a mistake here. Because I asked Rand prior to the season if he was considering re-signing any of the current players that had expiring contracts. Now, a lot of people will hear that and you'll think, oh, Derrick Henry. But that wasn't why I was really asking the question. I was asking the question because I was wondering about Danico Autry. And the Titans wanted to re-sign Danico Autry, but the Texans offered him $11 million, and the Titans were like, hey, congratulations, go enjoy Houston. But had the Titans gone to Danico Autry before the start of last season and had worked out a deal with him, and I think Autry's the one guy who has been so consistent for the most part. I know he got hurt at the end of the 22 season, but and they really took a nosedive when Autry got hurt. But that's the one guy I would have gone to last year. I wouldn't have gone to Fulton. I wouldn't have gone to Aziz. I wouldn't have gone to any of those. I would have gone to Autry. And I would have worked out a contract extension. Similarly to what I think they might want to do with DeAndre Hopkins. If you had Autry under contract, you could have used that 38th pick on a tackle. And then you'd have 2 tackles and not 1. And will that affect Will Levis? So with the decision not to re-sign Autry before the season forces you to take T'Vondre Sweat, and now you've got PT starting at right tackle. And if PT stinks as bad as he did last year, which maybe Bill Callahan will help, who knows, but if he stinks as bad as he did last year, I mean, now you're in real trouble, and then a quarterback's getting hit again, and now, again, nature versus nurture. This league ruins more quarterbacks than it makes. I'm convinced of that. 615-737-1025. Robert says Steve Young got to sit behind Montana. Rodgers got to sit behind Brett Favre. I think there is a lot to be said about sitting behind a quarterback and learning before being thrown out there. I think that, again, the best quarterback that ever played, Tom Brady, did not play as a rookie. The best quarterback in the game today, Patrick Mahomes, did not play as a rookie. Aaron Rodgers did not play as a rookie. Burrow and Manning are the exception to the rule. They are not the rule. I would just be careful about throwing a guy out there before you really just, because I saw it with Marcus. Marcus wasn't ready. Marcus probably was ready, but that line was so bad. That line ruined Marcus. Ruined him. Eli said Will Levis had a better rookie year than Peyton Manning. So did Vince Young. So did everybody. So did Tommy DeVito. He had a better rookie year than Peyton Manning. All right, Trevor joins us next. 615-737-1025. If you want to weigh in, that's 615-737-1025. Trevor was at OTAs last week. We've got OTAs coming up tomorrow. And again, a lot of people are really focused in here as far as with the Titans. What about Levis? What does he think about where Levis is? What does he think about bringing Levis along? We'll do that next with Trev. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. This week's Nashville's best deal is Beach Bend Park and Splash Lagoon Water Park. Go to the game Nashville.com/deals for a buy one, get one free admission for just $49.99. Beach Bend Park is your ticket to summer fun. Beach Bend Park and Splash Lagoon Water Park, just a short drive to Bowling Green, Kentucky. So, OTAs tomorrow for the Titans. They'll be out on the field, and we'll get kind of a glimpse as to who's in, who's out, who's looking good, who's not, what have you. Again, it's OTAs. I said this with training camp last year. I got excited about Chickaconquo. I'm not getting excited about anything in training camp. I'm going to know what's bad from training camp this year. But there are a lot of people that are not giving Will Levis the chance. Bill Barnwell at ESPN had the superlatives for each AFC team. And basically the superlatives for the Titans, it was not pretty. In fact, I think kind of called the fans stupid in a roundabout way. But the idea is that the Titans fans are the most likely fans to talk themselves into its starting quarterback after breaking out after a few practice preseason snaps. And it's like, again, the assumption is Levis is going to be terrible, and I don't think that's fair. Trevor Matich joins us now on the program, presented by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So, Trev, I want to start with this. There is a national sentiment that Will Levis stinks. And I don't know exactly where it comes from. I don't know if it's the mayonnaise in the coffee. I don't know if it's that he fell in the draft. Jalen Hurts fell in the draft, and there wasn't this narrative out there that he sucked. But apparently there is around Will Levis. What I find to be unfair is that I just don't think people are giving Levis the chance to be good, which I think he has. Do you see some of the negativity surrounding Levis, and do you think that the national perception of Levis is off?
Well, Jared, you've got to admit the mayonnaise in the coffee is pretty weird.
Again, I don't like that stuff. I don't like the quirky doing it for attention stuff. But I didn't like Taylor Lewan hosting a podcast while he played, and he was a good left tackle, so I was cool with it.
Yeah, no, I think from a national standpoint, they don't see every play. You and I watch every play that Will Levis made last year. And I'm not saying that the national guys don't watch a lot of football. They do. But I think some of the loudest voices against Will Levis are looking at his stats. For example, they're looking at completion percentage, right? Touchdown, interception. They're looking at his stats under pressure. All those things look pretty low. And I think people recognize that the offensive line last year was epically bad. But unless you really watched them, it was hard to really fully understand the interaction between the bad offensive line and the weak receiving core, and how all that dumped a heap of negativity on the opportunity for Will Levis to do his best. And so, yeah, he wasn't, his performance fell off dramatically under pressure, but that pressure wasn't just pressure. That was defenders in his face almost as soon as he got to the back of his drop. I mean, guys coming from every direction. No place along that line was safe for Will Levis. There was no safe space. There was no place that he knew if things started to collapse on him, he knew he could move towards left guard or right tackle or any other place where he could count on an island of stability in the blocking. No place. And so pressure for Will Levis last year was a whole lot different from pressure for most quarterbacks. And, the things that we saw last year from Will Levis in the way he handled himself as a rookie quarterback with all those things breaking down and the receiving core and tight ends, et cetera, as receivers, not giving him the quick open targets that he had to have on a consistent basis, with the exception of DeAndre Hopkins. But, they double-teamed him a lot on defense. So all these things add up to a performance that, from a grade standpoint, from a statistical standpoint, you can make the case that Levis just had a bad year last year. But truthfully, I thought the way he handled it gave me a whole lot of encouragement for the future with Will Levis. I thought it was actually very positive, because I don't just look at the grades, I look at how he arrived at each performance.
Trevor, do you think that the Titans have done enough? Tom Brady was on Colin Cowherd yesterday, and he was basically like, for these young quarterbacks, yeah, it's about whether or not you have the talent. Yeah, it's about whether or not you can process and kind of run the game the way Drew Brees ran it, or Peyton Manning, or Phillip Rivers. But a lot of it, too, he said, is about being in the right situation with the right coaches that put you in the right situations and the right players around you, and he cited Drew Bledsoe around him. Do you think that Will Levis is in a place where he's got an opportunity to succeed? Like, have they done enough around him with the coach and the coaching staff and the receivers and the offensive line and everything where he can really flourish?
All of the above, with the exception of the right side of that offensive line, and really specifically right tackle, which is the biggest question mark. But let's just look at a couple of those. Last year, from a receiving standpoint, and really just pass catchers in general, because you have to include the tight ends and the running backs, they had DeAndre Hopkins. Defenders knew that was the guy they had to stop, and nobody else was consistently a threat. I mean, Nick Westbrook-Akine, I think, gets too much grief a lot of times from fans because he's not particularly explosive, but he steps in and steps up and is productive to the level of his potential over and over and over again, even though that potential is not terribly high. And I respect that a lot. But he's not a guy that defenses really worry about. And so from a receiver standpoint, now all of a sudden with Hopkins, you've got a true deep threat in Calvin Ridley Jr., free agent. You've got one of the best slot receivers in the nation, Tyler Boyd, who could also move outside, by the way. And that puts former first-round draft choice Treylon Burks at the number 4 wide receiver at best. And if he finally breaks out and lives up to his potential with the pressure off of him, that receiving core is going to be just phenomenal comparatively. And certainly DeAndre Hopkins has said that on paper, this is the best group of wide receivers that he's played with. And that's saying a lot because he's got no reason to go out with hyperbole there. Offensive line, let's just look at one spot. Last year at center, the Titans were incredibly ineffective, to put it as gently as possible. What that meant was that every time Levis dropped back in the pocket, he had a defender, not every time, most every time, he had a defender pushing up the middle to keep him from being able to step up in the pocket, to limit his throwing lanes with that defender right in front of him, to limit his ability to find receivers because he had to change his position in the pocket because of that pressure up the middle. And it wasn't always just, a free runner. A lot of times the center, who was about 270-some pounds, kept getting pushed right back into him. So it was his own guy, his center, that was creating the pressure in terms of the physical body presence. But it wasn't just getting pushed back. That center, whenever a defender rushed him on one shoulder or the other, he usually turned him and came free. It was just terrible. Lloyd Cushenberry, the free agent addition now out of Denver at center, is going to fix that problem at that position in a lightning bolt and give Levis all of a sudden space in front of him so that he can step up in the pocket, so he can see, so he can have normal NFL passing lanes, for goodness sake. So if you just look at those two things, you can see dramatic improvements in the people around Levis that will allow him to be able to play quarterback without having to be desperate all the time. Then you throw into it the coaching staff and the way the scheme is going to work and the fact that they've made changes at running back that change the style of this offense. Instead of just a big downhill handed off to Derrick Henry, all of a sudden they've got multiple capabilities from both of their top 2 running backs where they can line up in the backfield, they can line up at receiver, they can line up at H-back, all kinds of things you can do that were not available to Levis last year. So they still have work to do, but I've got to tell you, Jared, I am borderline astonished at how quickly they made as many improvements to this offensive roster as the Titans have done.
You're really astonished? I mean, if somebody gave you $150 million, you'd probably be able to go out and get some good players.
Yeah, and they did, though, didn't they? They did. And in free agency, they took away desperate needs for draft. They brought in 2 new starting corners, so they didn't have to draft a corner in the first couple of rounds, right? From a receiver standpoint, bringing in Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley Jr. at receiver means they didn't have to take a receiver in the first couple of rounds. And what they ended up doing, and this is interesting to me, that Brian Callahan was coaching offense with the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and all those high-flying skill people. He had the opportunity to choose, or to be a part of the staff that chose, put it that way, whether or not they would draft in the first round when Jamar Chase came out, the best receiver in the draft, Chase out of LSU, or the best offensive lineman probably in the draft, Penei Sewell out of Oregon. They chose the receiver. Penei Sewell went to Detroit. Both players have turned out to be phenomenal players. So in Brian Callahan's first draft here, a lot of people wonder what he would do. Well, they took care of the small guys in free agency. And so in Brian Callahan's first draft, what does he do? He picks one of the biggest, most powerful bulldozing offensive linemen in the first round and one of the biggest, most powerful, disruptive interior defensive linemen in the second round to go old school in the draft. And I thought that was great. And all of it helps Will Levis. You make the defense better. Levis doesn't have to desperately throw the ball down the field to try to catch up in the second half. You put better receivers and better protection, everything gets easier for Levis. It's like Levis, you know how baseball players in the on-deck circle, they have a bat and they put weighted donuts on the bat and they swing it around so that the bat feels lighter when they take those off and step up to the plate? It's like Will Levis didn't just have a bat with weighted donuts. He was swinging an entire tree, like a big old pine tree, picked it up by one of the roots and tried to swing it around, right? And then went up to the plate with that same pine tree. That's how he had to play last year. Well, with the additions that the Titans have brought in, they still have holes in this offensive roster. They still have places they need to fill. But with the improvements that they made, at least Will Levis gets to swing a regulation baseball bat instead of having to pick up a giant tree by the root and try to hit a fastball with it.
Although, as you did say, they don't have a right tackle. Trevor Matich is with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. So I do have a big J.C. Latham question ahead of OTAs tomorrow, and another kind of more so a cerebral question with Levis. We'll do that coming up next. Here is Trevor's, presented by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Let's talk Window Nation first, though. Window Nation is a trustable company. I trust Window Nation. I brought them out to my home for the free in-home consultation. They took a look at my windows and said, hey, your windows are fine. You've got good windows. You do not need to replace your windows. I said, you got to be kidding me. You drove all the way out here to my home in order to try to sell me windows, and you're telling me my windows are good, I don't need them. And they said yes. And I said, that's unbelievable that I can trust a company like that, and I feel so comfortable in telling you about Window Nation, because there are a lot of companies that are trying to get you business with windows. They'll put mailers in there, they'll advertisements on TV, radio, and they've all got great deals and everything else. And I can't tell you if those companies are good, bad. I can't tell you. I can tell you Window Nation is a trustworthy, reputable, big-time company. I talked to the people at Window Nation last week, like at the top at Window Nation. They're great people. And this month, they've got the semi-annual sale, 50% off all windows, no interest for 5 years, and bonus savings when you schedule a consult today. So call 866-90NATION or visit windownation.com. Again, 50% off all windows, no interest for 5 years, bonus savings with that consult, 866-90NATION, windownation.com. Become a sponsor of the tournament or register as a team and join the 615 Open. That's our golf experience. Proceeds will help raise money for Souls for Souls. Sponsorship package could include email campaigns, commercials, radio advertising, and more. That seems pretty cool. Trevor Matich is with us, presented by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. OTAs tomorrow, Trevor, and I will be out there. But I do have this question that, I think a lot of Titan fans are assuming. J.C. Latham's making the move from right tackle to left tackle. Well, hey, Bill Callahan did it with Jedrick Wills, and Bill Callahan did it with Tyron Smith, and Bill Callahan can do it with J.C. Latham. We shall see. But my question for you is, how long is the adjustment period? Because the expectation, fair or unfair, is that J.C. Latham is going to the Hall of Fame. And so what does J.C. Latham, what is fair to expect for J.C. Latham off the bat as he makes this adjustment from one tackle to the other?
I think it's fair to assume that he'll make the adjustment fairly quickly. The problem for him will be the speed of the regular season, because that's going to be different from practice and even preseason games. It's good that he's got Arden Key and Harold Landry to practice against, because those guys, when they're at their best, are really good pass rushers. And they'll force Latham to be technically sound in his pass sets. Otherwise, they'll just run right by him. He won't even touch him. So that's good in practice. The problem is when you get to preseason games, it's even faster. And so the angle that you take in practice to get a pass set in position to be able to cut off a speed rusher on the corner, on the edge, that is going to have to change a little bit. And the way you kick out there is going to have to change a little bit, whether it's just to speed it up or change the angle. Then when you get into the regular season, things are faster still. I know it seems weird to fans that the speed would change. It changes again in the playoffs, and it changes again in the Super Bowl. But it gets just faster and faster as time goes on. But he won't be able to prepare for the speed of the game at left tackle until he gets into the season opener. And then he's in for a bit of a shock. I can tell you this, that in my NFL career, I ended up in kind of a weird position where two of my first 4 years I was hurt. The other 2 years, everybody else got hurt, and I had to shift around to different positions, and coaches started to realize that I was very valuable that way, so I never focused in at one spot to really excel at one spot. I was always moving at different positions. So when I would be practicing inside at guard and center, and all of a sudden our left tackle got hurt, I'd have to kick out to left tackle, and it would take me a series to kind of get used to it out there. Even though in practice I would work at it and things like that, the speed of it is a shock when you get into the game. And so we won't really know if J.C. Latham is going to be able to do this until he gets into the regular season and deals with that speed.
Trevor, are the Titans making a mistake? Brian Callahan came out and said that he wants to try Dylan Radins at guard. And one thing that every coach says, every GM says, we want to get the best 5 guys out there, which I think sounds good, but I also think, there is a difference between tackles and guards. And I know that you see Radins, at his best as a guard too. But given Nicholas Petit-Ferrer's inconsistency, and I think overall poor play when he has been available, and Jalen Duncan and how terrible he was last year, maybe Bill Callahan gets those guys into shape and they're good players, or I don't know. But is it a mistake if the Titans do not practice Radins at right tackle, given that last year he was the best right tackle they had?
Jared, I think they have to practice him there. And if they practice him at guard as well, okay. That's what I did, except I had to practice on both sides of the line and center. At least for Radins, he'll practice on the right side with his right hand in the ground when he's in a three-point stance. And so that kind of helps. When you switch to the other side, like J.C. Latham is doing, you put your left hand on the ground and your left foot is back a little bit and your right foot is up and your steps are all backwards. And so it kind of throws you off until you get used to it. But what you said about Nicholas Petit-Ferrer is the risk. You're right about that. I think that if he stays healthy, he'll have a better season than most people expect this year at right tackle. But the Titans can't count on that. What they do know is that last year, Dylan Radins at right tackle fought like a crazed pit bull in a junkyard every single play. And he wasn't always good enough, but he fought. and he gave Will Levis a chance more often than not, most of the time, to where he wasn't the weak spot on that offensive line, not even close. And so I think with that experience, he'll be at least that good if they keep him a right tackle this year. But I think he'll be better. You and I watched practice in their open OTAs a week or two ago, and you and I were watching Dylan Radins in fantastic football shape. I mean, everybody else, you could see the humidity weighing on them. Radins, it looked like he was in an air-conditioned room the whole time. I mean, he led the offensive line running between fields, from one drill to another. He finished every single drill the right way instead of getting toward the end of the drill and he's tired and he kind of fell off with his focus of his technique and everything. Not Radins. Radins was finishing every drill. I mean, he looks like he's better this year than Titans fans have ever seen him. And he's got another year in the Titans weight room, which will make him stronger, which is something he needed. So, I think that the Titans need Dylan Radins to be ready to go at guard and tackle. And Daniel Brunskill was serviceable at right guard last year. And until Nicholas Petit-Frere proves that he's a solid right tackle, Radins might be the only next best choice.
Trevor Matich is with us on the program. Trevor, what do you expect? How long do you expect it to take for us to know whether or not, Brian Callahan has been raving up and down about Will Levis ever since he took the job, or ever since he really got to know Levis. And I do think some of that's genuine, though. Callahan does have a little bit of a habit lately of saying that everybody's doing great. But I do wonder, the mental aspect of the game slowing down for Levis, the ability for him to learn from his mistakes of last year. How long will it take? A lot of people just assume he'll be able to do that. I think some guys never, ever hit their peak because they can't do it. I wonder for you, how long will it take for us to learn if Levis really is getting the cerebral side of the game down pat?
We'll know in the first month of the season because he'll have more and better receivers across the width and depth of the field that he'll have to choose from in his progression. And he'll have time to find them, more certainly than he did last year. Last year, he'd drop back and look at one guy and heave it a lot of times. And sometimes those heaves turned into pretty good plays. But you didn't see him drop back and changes his progression. And this is important because every quarterback can stand in the meeting room in front of a whiteboard and diagram what the progression should be. The coach will tell him, okay, pre-snap, this is the look. There's two safeties deep. This corner's up. That corner's back. That's look. After the snap, the safeties do this. The corners flop, and the linebacker buzzes outside. How does the progression change? And every quarterback will be able to say, well, now this is my number one. That's my number two over there, and my number three is that guy. And now my check down outlet is over here. Everyone can tell you that. The problem is that at the snap, when the defense gets out of their disguise and into their actual coverage, you have to know before you get to the back of your drop where you're going to go with the ball. And so Levis is going to have more time. He's going to have more receivers that are going to be more open. And we'll know in the first few games of the season if he is making that evaluation from the point of the snap to the point that he's at the back of his drop quickly and correctly, because the ball will come out on time. And if it comes out to the second guy, it'll be, instead of drop, set, throw, it might be drop, set, hitch, throw. And if it's the third guy, instead of drop, set, hitch, it'll be drop, set, hitch, turn your feet to the other side, then throw. You'll be able to see the rhythm of the pass pattern as he goes through it in the progression. And if he's able to do that on time, then you know that Levis has all the physical abilities to be able to execute physically. Some of the most physically gifted quarterbacks I've ever seen were about 1 to 1.5 seconds late with their recognition between snap and back of the drop, and they were never able to fully engage their talent. So we'll know in the first month of the regular season if Levis is able to make that evaluation where he does have time and where he does have targets.
Trevor Matich, presented by ESPN Bet Sportsbook and Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trev, great stuff. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep, Trevor Matich joining us on the program as he always does. Great stuff. Incredibly detailed there. I saw somebody did some podcast video about, like, Trevor Matich is hyping up Dylan Radins, and I got a good chuckle out of that. Coming up next, speaking of podcasts, Rand Carthon sat down with the boys from Bussin' with the Boys. And I got two big takeaways about Rand Carthon after that sit-down interview. One good, one complimentary, one that maybe people are going to get mad about, but it's the truth. We'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 for the game. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106 through the game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Rand Carthon was on Bussin' with the Boys. Thought it was a very good interview. Rand sat down with the boys. They broke it down. I listened to the whole thing. And let me say this. I've listened to the Brian Callahan interview and the Rand Carthon interview, and I do agree that the Titans need to bring the pain train back. Terry Tate, the office linebacker, if you're my age or a little bit older, you remember those old Reebok commercials. You kill the Joe, you make some more. They need to bring the pain train back, but that's a different discussion. So I had two big takeaways after listening to Rand Carthon. I've already been over the whole, I walked out of that not knowing if he actually wanted Mike Vrabel fired or not after all the sunshine pumping he did with Vrabel, but that's not really a takeaway. That's just kind of an observation. Here are my 2 takeaways. The first, I think Rand would be a pretty good talk show host. Like in that kind of setting, not a press conference, not kind of a free-for-all, everybody trying to ask, just a conversation. I found Rand to be very likable watching that. And I think he would need to be on a show, with a shooter like me and not some boring vanilla guy that, brings the ball across the floor, what we call a passer. He'd need to be with a shooter, but I think he'd be a pretty good talk show host. So I'm going to give him that. The second thing is he said a lot of things on that podcast I have a hard time believing. A lot of things. And we'll get to them in a second. But what's going to happen is people are going to take me saying that I have a hard time believing a lot of what Rand Carthon said, and they're going to say, you hate Rand, you're calling him a liar, I'm not calling him a liar. Because I'm not saying that I have proof that he's lying. I'm just saying I don't believe a lot of the things he said because I'm not sure they totally add up. And so here's a snippet of some of these things. First, let's start off with the draft board the Titans put together. Again, and Floyd used to talk about this, you put the draft board together according to NFL standards. So you want your board to match up with how the draft goes. Even if you like Jimmy better than Johnny, but Johnny is a better player, you need to know that Johnny's the 13th best player in the draft because you may like Jimmy at 23 and you're sitting there at 14. Well, trade down to get the right guy. So the board has to match the league standards. Here's what Rand said about the Titans board during the draft.
I will say, and we were talking about this at the office last week, I will say of every draft room I've been in, this was probably the most accurate board that I've ever been a part of because we rank them vertically, then we rank them horizontally, right, by position. This was probably the most accurate board I've ever been a part of.
Now, when you say vertically and horizontally, are you talking about best players vertically?
Yeah, so we have the positions going horizontally, right, just straight across, split offense, defense. And so if we got quarterbacks here, we rank them vertically, from 1 to whatever. And you do that for every position. And then you go across horizontally, like, okay, is this quarterback better than this receiver? And then you start adjusting the cards as you go. So it's kind of like this as it goes across, the board.
Okay. This is the best, most accurate board I've ever been a part of. Really? The best? So, did you have Michael Penix going off the board at 8 to the Falcons?
Dude, what was your thought on the Atlanta Falcons taking Penix? Being in the GM chair, you kind of see too the video of the owner talking to Terry, the GM, and people are kind of like saying whatever, like, "Oh, wonder what this conversation is."
That's
like,
a bottom
I kid you not. Like we had a inkling that was going to happen, that they were going to take him. You got to understand our assistant GM, Anthony Robinson, he just came from Atlanta. So he spent his whole career in Atlanta. I started my career in Atlanta, with him. So you kind of get a feel for how things are done organizationally, regardless of who's running it. But we probably about 2 weeks prior, we were sitting around, we were talking about all the, we call it team needs. And we're kind of going through it. And we were like, quarterback? And it was like, so you start playing with it, and then it kind of became clear. It was like, man, like they really could go Penix right here. And so when it happened, I wish you could see like our room. We kind of like a couple of us kind of looked at each other like, so it wasn't a real surprise to us.
Really? Like, really? So we had the most accurate draft board ever, and the biggest shocker, they were like, oh, yeah, no, we saw that coming. Really? And I get the whole idea, hey, Anthony Robinson was there, and I worked with Terry Fontenot, the general manager. If you know that, like if they actually knew that Atlanta was interested in a quarterback or that Atlanta was interested in Penix, you give that information to somebody else. Because that's how you trade info, right? The way that you hear things around the league is not, hey, we're thinking about drafting this guy. It's, hey, I hear Pittsburgh's thinking about drafting that guy. That's how you trade information. So if they knew we had an inkling, and, a couple of us guys in the room, we looked at each other when they made that pick. We're like, uh-huh. Yeah, we knew. So it wasn't on the most accurate draft board they had ever had because there were only a couple guys in there that knew. But apparently they knew. Do you believe that? Like we were sitting around talking team needs, and we were talking Atlanta, and yeah, they signed a quarterback to an $160 million contract, but we thought, you know what? Maybe they could go quarterback. Just like maybe we could go running back with Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard. Maybe we'll take a running back at 7. Nobody thought you were taking running back. Nobody thought they were taking running back. I have a hard time believing that. Then he talked about Calvin Ridley. Taylor Lewan brought up the fact that, the Titans were able to outbid the Jags in order to get Taylor Lewan, which, by the way, is normally how this works is, well, Johnny was in Dallas, and he liked Dallas, and he liked living in Dallas, and his wife's from Dallas, and they enjoyed their time at Dallas, but he ends up signing with Houston. Why? Because Houston offered the most money. That's usually what happens. But Rand Carthon says, no. Things here in Nashville are so good that Calvin Ridley didn't sign because the Titans offered him the most money.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. Everything was comparable, and he had the option to go back. Whether the number was, I'm good. Appreciate the offer though, being hospitable, I got you. Southern hospitality. He had the option to go wherever he wanted to go, but I think it's more of a positive in that we made him comfortable, coming here. And then the lesser known of the deal was, again, here, Nashville, Tennessee. His wife's family's from Huntsville.
I didn't know that.
Right down the road. Makes it an easy transition for her to still be now you're closer to your family, and so it, again, competitive advantage being here in Nashville.
So the wife's family's from Huntsville, and that's what lured Calvin Ridley in, right? Like that's what that's what ultimately was the difference. It wasn't the extra $1 million. I think Jacksonville was reportedly like in the 19 million range, and I think you went to 24. So it wasn't the extra $5 million or so that made the difference as to whether or not he was going to go back to Jacksonville. It was that his wife's family is in Huntsville, right? Come on now. In fact, Brian Callahan on a Titans podcast told the story that they thought they were going to have to deal with Ridley, and they thought they were like 80 or 90% there. And I say Rand thought they were there. He was still cautious. And then Jacksonville upped their offer, and then the Titans had to up their offer. It was obviously about the money. Just ask Calvin Ridley why he chose the Titans.
I really wanted to honestly be with the Jags, but, there was a lot of things that I wasn't working out for me. And then I think the Titans had that other side for me. So I chose the Titans. And obviously the money was pretty good. So I went with that.
I mean, he's telling you, I thought I was going to go to Jacksonville. The Titans offered me more money. That's why I picked the Titans. So it's it's great to say, hey, Nashville's a great spot, and we really got it going on, and we got the – but I have a hard time believing that Calvin Ridley, when he thought he was going to go back to Jacksonville, picked the Titans over Jacksonville because his wife's family's from Huntsville. Again, do you believe that? Do you believe that they thought Penix was going to Atlanta? And then my favorite. This is my favorite. This, one of two things is true. Either it's a lie, which I think might be the truth, or Brian Callahan hired a bad coaching staff, because he was talking about Brian Callahan putting together the coaching staff, and Rand told this story that there's just no way this is true.
And the one thing that stood out with Callie was he had a depth chart of coaches. And I'm not saying when I say a depth chart, and he literally had a 3 deep. But it wasn't just like, all right, I want this guy, and if I can't get this guy, then this guy's the backup, and if I can't get him, then this. No. He had, these are 3, tier 1, here's 3, tier 2, here's 3, tier 3. And he had that for every single position. And so you knew looking at that, like, this guy's put a lot of thought process into this, you know, and he's well thought out. He's well researched. And I can say, because I was looking at it the other day, like, we legitimately got number one on every one of his positions.
Damn.
He had his old man.
He did not. He did not have his old man on the list. He was, and I told in the interview, I was like, "Hey, man, elephant in the room. What's up with Pops?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Are we trying to?" He was like, "Hey, man, honestly, we haven't had the conversation."
Well, not only that, Rand Carthon just admitted to tampering because Bill Callahan was under contract with the Browns at that point in time. But put that aside. Again, like, Taylor Lewan's like, oh, he's like, let me tell you something. Brian Callahan put together this unbelievable depth chart of coaches. He had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It was very detailed. You could tell the thought he put into the coaching staff, and he got his top choice every time. Was the offensive line coach his top choice, his dad? No. Well, then that means that there's one tier 1 coach they didn't get. Because I assume that he, in his plan, had an offensive line coach. But do you really believe that they got every assistant coach that they wanted? Like, that's not possible, right? Like, again, unless all of Brian Callahan's coaches were not wanted by anybody else, it is almost impossible for me to believe that the Tennessee Titans swung and hit on every single assistant coach that they wanted to go get. I've heard PK say that Jim Schwartz told him the biggest mistake that he made was thinking that his first staff in Detroit was going to be his best staff because you got to kind of figure you're a young coach, you're putting things together, you're on the fly, other guys are under contract elsewhere. I mean, Brian Callahan didn't even work with the defensive coordinator. I don't even know what he knew about the defensive coordinator. Ram is the one who worked with the defensive coordinator. The defensive coordinator was never a coordinator before. So I highly doubt that Brian Callahan was like, let me tell you something. Those DBs on the Ravens are really, 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 really good. And so I only want the DB coach of the Ravens to be my defensive coordinator. That's my first option. Over, say, like a guy who's done it before, like Brandon Staley or something like that. Again, nobody gets everything they want in life all the time. If you were to tell me that, hey, Brian Callahan put together a list of coaches that he wanted when he took the job, and he got about 6 or 7 guys. And the other guys, we all thought very highly of. You know, one guy we didn't know, but Denard recommended it. That I can believe. The idea that Brian Callahan in his job interview showed up with a depth chart of coaches and nailed every single one of them is just not believable. Just like I don't believe that they thought Michael Penix was going to the Falcons. Just like I don't believe that Calvin Ridley picked the Titans, not because of the money, but because his wife's family is from Huntsville. Just like I don't believe the stories that he told on 104.5 when Skoronski, Colton Dowell, and Tavondre Sweat were drafted, that he's got GMs across the league texting him when he makes the picks each time saying, great pick. We were going to take that guy. Now, again, I don't have proof that he's lying. I mean, TD says that he saw the text messages, so maybe they exist. I don't know. But let me ask you this. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Brian Callahan got every assistant coach he wanted? Do you believe that they foresaw Michael Penix, who a lot of people thought might be the 4th or 5th best quarterback? The 5th or 6th best quarterback, going ahead of J.J. McCarthy to the Falcons after they signed Kirk Cousins. And it's like, again, you know, and I can't believe you on this stuff. Like, if you're going to, again, I'm not saying he's lying because I don't have proof that he's lying. I didn't see the draft board. I didn't see Penix is the 7th best player on the board, and he goes off at 8. I didn't see that, so I can't say he did or didn't. But I feel like he's probably lying. And, again, when you're making a bunch of stuff up like that, especially stuff that you don't have to make up, it's okay to say you outbid Jacksonville for Calvin Ridley. And it's like, what else are you not telling the truth about? So, again, I think he'd be a good talk show host. You know, put him as a, you know, kind of the expert guy, the football guy, with a guy like me on a Jared and the GM type show, it'd be pretty good. But, man, he says a lot of stuff that I'm like, I just don't believe that. And maybe I'm a skeptic. I don't know. 615-737-1025. For the record, Vrabel said a lot of things I didn't believe, and I called that out too. So don't be getting on me saying, oh, you just look at one guy. No. When I felt like I said John Robinson lied to my face when I asked him if he trade A.J. Brown on draft night, and he said, I don't foresee it. Yeah, Maury Povich's lie detector test came back. That was a lie. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll get to your phones on this. Plus, there's a narrative that the True Blue Titan crew has been perpetuating since Mike Vrabel got fired, that I think ran Carthon, which is a defensive ran Carthon that I actually think ran on Bussin' with the Boys, completely blows to smithereens. We'll get to that next. Twice Daily. I love Twice Daily. I was at Twice Daily this weekend. Twice Daily is a spot for me where I stop all the time, but especially like before I'm heading out to the lake because we can get all the lake snacks, we can get all the lake drinks, we can get some made-to-order pizzas, we can get some made-to-order wings. We can get trust me, Twice Daily. It's becoming my pre-lake stop. They have all your cravings, and you can save on every visit. Stop in and get rewarded. All you need to do is be like me and join the Twice Daily Rewards program to unlock special discount savings, enter their sweepstakes, and so much more. Try their new wraps, Italian ham and cheddar turkey and Swiss and Nashville hot chicken. And they're made to order with your favorite toppings so that when you download the Twice Daily app, you can order ahead. Or at Twice Daily, it is snack time all the time. And they've got favorites like chicken fingers, tater rounds, new pretzels, and more. Twice Daily. What are you craving?
How was that transition for y'all? How those discussions, for what you can say?
I'd say it was tough. That day was really tough. I'll speak personally. It was one of those, and this is just being full transparent. When it happened, I called my wife and I was like, hey, like this just happened. And the first thing my wife says is, you need to call Rhea, which is my daughter. And I'm like, why? She was like, because she doesn't need to hear that coach got fired from one of the kids in school, because my kids don't have social media. And so my daughter had a really close relationship with Mike. And if you look on her screensaver on her phone right now, it's a picture of her and Mike, and that hasn't changed. And so, not only to have that happen to him, but to now I got to communicate this to my daughter, and then to have he's now 7-year-old son who he thinks he's the GM and the owner and the head coach. He legitimately, when he got out of school, my wife told him, and he was like, what are you doing? Like, my son said this to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was tough.
Mike Vrabel's firing was tough on Rand Carthon. Really. Like, oh, man. That firing was so tough. I had to talk to my kid. I didn't want my kids to find out from anybody else. I called my wife as soon as it happened. It was a really dark day. It was really tough. It was really – are you talking about when you got fired, or are you talking about when the other guy got fired? Because, I know the story Floyd told me when he got fired was basically he walked out of the facility, he got in the car, he ran home, and he told Sally, pack your bags, we're going to Vegas because we're going to get out of here before everybody else gets going into what, starts, cameras show up let's go, get out, let's go. I don't know if that's what happened when he fired Jack Pardee. I don't think first thing he did was call Sally and say, hey, Sally, I just fired Jack Pardee. Are you doing okay? But apparently that's what Rand Carthon said on Bussin' with the Boys. I actually texted Sean Reese. I said, did your dad call you when he fired Jack Pardee? He said, I was young, so probably not. But, hey, Rand's son's 7 years old. Rand called his son and said, hey, son, let me have a serious talk with you. I fired Mike Vrabel today. Or at least I was in the room when Mike Vrabel got fired today. Or at least I heard about it afterwards when they fired Mike Vrabel. But the point of the matter is he did go on Bussin' with the Boys, and he talked about how much he and Mike got along and how much Mike helped him in year one and how Mike's a good coach and is going to win somewhere else. And he said, that he considered Mike a friend for life at the press conference the day that they fired Vrabel. And so all I'm going to say about that is this. If Rand Carthon is as torn up about Mike Vrabel's firing as he said he was on Bussin' with the Boys, then I'm pretty sure that kills the narrative that the true blue let Rand cook crew has come up with, which was that Rand is a great GM. You watch Jared, and last year Dillard and Brewer and the Garden 11 and all the bull crap, that was all Vrabel's fault. Vrabel was holding Rand Carthon back. And the DeAndre Hopkins deal, because that worked, that was a Rand Carthon deal. But even though DeAndre didn't know Rand, he knew Vrabel. But everything else was all Vrabel's fault. Who thought that Andre Dillard playing left tackle was going to be a good idea? Vrabel. Who thought giving Aaron Brewer a second-round tender at $4.3 million when you could have given him a right of first refusal at $2.6 million? Who thought that was a good idea? Vrabel. Who didn't have a right tackle? Vrabel. So all the bad things were Vrabel. But we fleeced Howie Roseman for a 5th and a 6th round pick. We fleeced Howie Roseman. Rand gets credit for that. DeAndre Hopkins signs a below market contract. Rand gets credit for that. It's again, it's very convenient. Now, I'll say this. I don't understand after the whole, year that we went through where Vrabel was taking passive-aggressive swipes at Carthon. Again, always mentioning Anthony Robinson and Chad Brinker when it came to his relationship with Rand, whether it was I didn't say Will Levis was going to be the starting quarterback. Every time he did that. So I have a hard time believing that it was all sunshine and rainbows, but the way Rand talks about it, it's like he loved Vrabel. So there's no way that, again, if he loved Vrabel as much as he says he loved Vrabel, there's no way he could have looked at Vrabel as the guy holding him back, which, again, is a narrative that a lot of you want to perpetuate because no matter how you slice it, last year's offseason was a disaster. Will this year's offseason be better? Lord, I hope, but I don't know. We don't know if J.C. Latham can make the transition to left tackle. We don't know if L'Jarius needs a hold up. We don't know if Calvin Ridley and Nicholas Petit-Frere can stay out of the sports book and bet on the. We don't know. But last year's offseason was a disaster, and he was a part of it. But everybody wants to just blame Vrabel because that's convenient, and he's telling you he loved Vrabel. So if he doesn't think Vrabel's the problem, then how can you guys get up there and say Vrabel was the problem? Hilarious. 615-737-1025. Phone line driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com. Sean says, Rand sounds like a guy who's incapable of allowing people to think that he either doesn't know the answer or isn't an expert on a topic. I don't agree with that. I think Rand can do that because I asked him about developing kickers last year, and he was like, I don't know anything about that. He's like, but you go watch Coach Hawk, talking about Craig Aukerman, who, of course, I'll tell you what, if you're looking for advice, that's the guy you don't want to go to. But he said, but go watch how Coach Hawk does it, and that's how we try to figure out developing kickers or something like that. I don't know. He will admit to what he doesn't know. My thing with Rand is I believe that Rand says in any given moment, and this is my belief, I don't know if this is true or not because I barely know the guy, but Rand says in the moment whatever he thinks is going to elicit the most positive response then. Like, it's kind of like the Miranda rights. Everything you say can and will be used against you. You say something on Tuesday in the context of Tuesday, and then on Thursday, the exact opposite happens. Well, I'm going to go back to Tuesday and say, wait a minute, you said on Tuesday. And I think that at that point, he's just like, oh, yeah, screw Tuesday. Whatever, doesn't count. And I think that there's a lot of enabling around him that allows that. Like the not going to the Senior Bowl to work on the coaching staff, right? Again, here's the context. Titans are building the coaching staff. Rand doesn't go to the Senior Bowl. I think it's ridiculous that the general manager of the Titans is not at the Senior Bowl. Everybody tells me that he doesn't need to be at the Senior Bowl. He does a podcast with Mike Keith and Dave McGinnis where they talk about how it's a good thing that he wasn't at the Senior Bowl. And yet Brian Callahan got every coach on his depth chart that he wanted ahead of time. So what did he need Rand's help for? If he brought the depth chart and got every number one choice, why did he need Rand's help? Why couldn't Rand go to the Senior? You see what I'm saying? It's like, it's just a lot of bull crap. Like that, I'm sorry. It's a lot of bull crap. More of your phone, 615-737-1025. Let me say it. I'm sorry. I think it's a lot of bullcrap. Maybe Calvin Ridley didn't pick the Titans over the money, even though he kind of said it was the money. Maybe they did think Michael Penix was going number 8. Maybe he and Vrabel were bet. I don't know. Come on. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company, 1025, 106.3 The Game.
Last year, I couldn't imagine doing it without Vrabes, because he's a vet, one of the smartest, football minds I've ever been around. And just having him there to bounce things off of, because I don't give a damn what position you're in. You've never done it till you've done it. You can read every book there is. I can go and read every book there is on how to play basketball, but I've never played basketball till I've been out there on that court. And so that's how it was for me in the GM spot. But I had a guy in Mike that I can go and say, hey man, like, how does this part work? Or I'm not sure, about this.
Thank God I had Mike Vrabel that first year. I don't know what I would have done without one of the smartest football minds I've ever been around. One of the smartest football minds he's ever been around. Oh, yeah? Where's that smart football mind? We fired him. Keep in mind that his dad, Mo Carthon, is like an all-time coach, like an all-time assistant coach for Bill Parcells. And he played under Bill Parcells. But Vrabel, that's the best football mind, and they fired him. Like, it's hard to believe that that's true. Like, it kind of feels like he's just saying it to say it. Now, let me say this, because, again, I have no proof that Rand's lying. I mean, maybe he and Vrabel are best buddies, and, maybe the Vrabel or the Carthon family was torn to pieces when Uncle Mike got let go. I don't know. But I have a hard time believing a lot of that. Like, I have a hard time believing that Calvin Ridley chose the Titans because his wife's family's from Huntsville, as opposed to the fact that they paid him the most money, which is normally how these things go. But none of it matters, because if they win, Rand can say whatever he wants. If they lose, there is not one thing he can say to the bone of honesty that will make you happy with the fact that you can't protect the quarterback. So, I mean, I can complain about it. I don't think it's a good look for the general manager of the team to be throwing out such bull crap all the time. But it's not going to matter if they can go get good players. So that is the moral of the story here. Trent texts in and says, I agree with you. I not only think Rand lies, but I think he's very bad at it. I didn't say he's a liar. I said I just don't believe a lot of what he's saying. I talked to somebody with the Predators, when David Poyle retired. And the Predators were saying that David had chosen to retire, that they didn't go to David and say, David, you ain't won in forever. Your coach stinks. This team sucks. Like, it's time to move on. They didn't go up to him and say that. That's what they say. That David came to them and said, you know what, it's time for me to move on and, let's let Barry Trotz in here. And I said, I don't believe that. I mean, it sounds nice, but I don't believe it. And somebody said, are you calling the Predators a liar? I said, no, because I don't know for a fact that that's not the truth. I'm just saying I don't believe it. So I'm not saying that Rand Carthon for sure lied about knowing that Michael Penix was going to go at 8 to Atlanta. I'm just saying I don't believe it. So don't say I called him a liar, because I didn't say I called him a liar. One text says, Jared, if you really thought Rand was going to do an interview on Buzzing with the Boys bashing Vrabel, you must be on something. There's no way he would bash Vrabel for all of America to hear, but you know just as well as us fans do that we weren't going in the right direction with Vrabel. If you're honest, you will realize that J-Rob also got blamed for a lot when Vrabel was in on some of those decisions. So here's what I disagree with. There are things like when you work for an employer, when you're not just yourself. Like, unless you're Charles Barkley and you've got so much money and the ability to go get a platform somewhere else that, like, it doesn't matter what you do. Barkley could get fired from TNT for pissing them off. He'd go get a job tomorrow because people want to hear what Barkley has to say. Most of us are not Charles Barkley in that regard. And I would agree that Rand Carthon is not one of those guys that has the ability to say whatever he wants. But there is also a level of distancing yourself from something if you really don't believe it. And I believe where the Vrabel thing came from was, I think Will Compton asked about Rand in his second year, and he was like, well, thank God I had Vrabel that first year. Oh, my God, I couldn't have done it without Vrabel. Vrabel's the man. Like, he went out of his way to do that. There's a difference.
politician. That's what Amy has him out there doing, so that's just how it goes. But I got a couple questions for you. What do you think we need more, a safety or a pass rusher? And I got another one for you. What is the one thing you think can stop Will Levis from having a great season besides offensive line getting him crushed? Just his skill set, his precision, his timing, rhythm, footwork, all that. I just want to hear what your opinion is.
So I'll start on the defensive front. I'd rather have an edge rusher because I think you can fudge it at safety. Thank you, Kyle. You can fudge it at safety. And as far as, like, holding Levis back, obviously I think the offensive line is the number one thing. Here's, like, an underrated thing that a lot of people, like, it's because it's not always the same in how it's judged. Like, Justin Herbert doesn't win a lot of games, and still a lot of people think Justin Herbert's really, really good, me included. But for the most part, we equate good quarterbacking with winning. You know, I saw a comparison of the stats between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. It is not even close. Josh Allen is better in almost every category than Lamar Jackson. Lamar has 2 MVPs. Lamar's team wins more games. That's why. So if the defense is bad, so if you're not allowed to give me offensive line, which I think is probably the thing I'm the most worried about, it would be that the defense is not good enough and asks him to do too much. If you ask Will Levis to give you 19 points a game, I bet he can do that. You ask Will Levis to give you 28 points a game, it's going to be tough. So I would say that the defense is probably my second worry, and it's just because outside of Simmons, Snead, who has the knees, outside of Simmons, Snead, and McCreary, I don't feel like the defense has any, difference makers on it. I think Awuzie is a really good, solid corner, but I don't think he's a difference maker. I don't think Hooker's a difference maker. I don't think Landry at this point is a difference maker. I don't think Key's a difference maker. Tavondre Sweat, who knows? So I would go defense. Kind of worries me a little bit. One texter into the text line says, dude, we all know Amy Adams Strunk is the one who fired Mike Vrabel. Right. But that doesn't mean that, Rand wasn't a part of the discussions, right? I mean, we have to assume. And I guess maybe we don't have to assume. I guess everybody can believe whatever they want to believe. We live in this fracata world. But I have to assume that Amy didn't wake up and just fire Vrabel. I mean, I said on Monday, he got fired on Tuesday. I said on Monday, I was like, what I'm hearing is Vrabel could get fired, today. And a lot of people don't want to believe that. But I don't think it just happened overnight. I don't think that Rand was shocked when they told him that they fired Vrabel. And if Rand was shocked when they told him that they fired Vrabel, that is a whole nother discussion, right? Shouldn't the GM be in on the shouldn't the GM be in on the discussions? And if the GM is not in on those kind of discussions, then what's the point of even having a GM? Hey, man, we're going to fire the coach and then tell you about it later. And I'm sure that happens in the NFL because these owners are crazy. I'm not talking about Amy. I'm just talking about in general. These owners are nuts. So I'm sure that happens far more often than we probably think. But, I assume he was aware of what was going down. And then I do feel like at some point, if he really believed in Vrabel, and I don't know if he did or didn't, it sounds like he did, but again, the proof in the pudding makes me think that he didn't. That would be the time to stand up and say, wait a minute, hold on. I think Vrabel's a tremendous coach. I don't think we should do this. I think he's one of the best football minds I've ever been around. I really believe in Mike. I think that we're doing something great together. Let's stay the course. And it didn't sound like in the press conference Rand did after they fired Vrabel, it didn't sound like Rand felt that way. Then again, to the texter's point, it didn't sound like Rand was given much information about it other than go out there and talk. And boy, was that a disastrous press conference. One texter says, why does he have a reason to lie? What advantage does he gain by lying? I don't know. But Calvin Ridley picked the Titans, I believe, because of the money. And Ridley said the money. And he said it was because his wife's family's from Huntsville. Connor, I love you. But this is a part where I miss Ian. Texter into the text line says, all we ask is that you show Rand the same professionalism and favoritism that you did Poyle and Robinson. Is that so much to ask? What? Me? The one guy in town who was like, fire David Poyle. I mean, I'm the one guy, and I don't know what happened to the rest of this town, and I'm sure Joe's going to get mad about this tomorrow on the morning show, but Joe never came out and said fire Poyle. He had a strongly worded column about how things weren't going right, but he never said you need to fire David Poyle. Adam Vingan called him an unreliable narrator, a.k.a. a liar. But Adam never said that they needed to fire David Poyle. Now, I believe, and I'm not speaking for those guys, I am telling you my opinion of their feelings. I believe both guys thought it was time for David Poyle to go. But they didn't say it. I was the one guy who was saying, fire David Poyle, fire John Hines. If anything, the way that the way that I have approached Rand, like the way that I have treated Rand on the radio, is the same way I treated John Hines. And I was on John Hines' ass from day one because I thought John Hines was full of baloney. I mean, that man went up there. They gave up 7 goals in a period to St. Louis, and that man went up to the podium after they lost like 9-2 or 9-3 or whatever it was and was like, well, if we didn't give up those 7 goals in the second period, we would have won the game. I'm like, you did not just get up there and say that. I was on Hines every day. I was on Poyle every day. You cannot say that with a straight face that I was not on those guys. And that is exactly why I feel very confident in my criticisms. You know, somebody texted and said, if Rand doesn't hate you now, I hope he does. I don't know what he thinks. But I'll say this. I can't be friends with the coaches and the general managers and the players because if I was all about being buddies with them, then I couldn't tell it like it is. You know, I'm not knocking Lawan and Compton because they're doing whatever they think's best for them. But Lawan's the one who went crazy when they fired Vrabel. He was like, they'll be the biggest decision they ever made, the worst decision they ever made. And now here he is all buddy-buddy because they're coming on his bus. Well, he can't sit there when they say like, oh, yeah, no, Calvin Ridley picked Tennessee because his wife's family's from Huntsville, not because of the money. He can't look at him and say, that's bullcrap. You can't do that when you're bringing people on and whatever. Now, I've got a relationship with the Predators where I told them, hey, we'll put Barry Trotz on the show. If things ain't going well, like, we're going to have the conversations. But you can't always do that. And so this idea that, like, oh, no, you need to treat Rand the way you treated David Poyle. I'm treating him the way I treated David Poyle. I thought it was time for David Poyle to go, and I said it every day. Do you guys not remember after the Colorado series when I was like, he got to go, he's got to go, he's got to go? There was a part of me inside. I will never root for my team to lose. Like, unless the number one draft choice is on the line and there's one game to go. I was kind of rooting for the Predators to lose in the middle of last season. Not this past season, but the one before that, because I felt like if they made the playoffs, that would be enough to convince everybody that David Poyle and John Hines need to stay. And then when they traded Nino Niederreiter and that kind of set off that whole sell-off, I was like, yes! Yes! So don't say I don't get on other people, because I do. Don't say this is a race thing, because David Poyle and John Hines are white, and I was on them all the time. This is a Rand Carthon wants us to believe that they thought Michael Penix was going to the Falcons at 8, and I don't buy it kind of thing. 615-737-1025, Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 the game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. So, a lot of people, by the way, the text line is on fire right now. I'd say it's probably 65%, 35%. 65% think Rand Carthon's full of it. 35% are like, Jared, you are so mean. Maybe Rand did know that the Falcons were going to take Michael Penix at 8. I have a hard time believing that. But, again, who knows? So tomorrow the Titans have OTAs. They're open to the media. Like, they've had OTAs all throughout. But there's only a couple that are open to the media, and then there's the mandatory minicamp, and then they go away, for 6 weeks in the middle of next month, and then they show up at the end of July, and that's when training camp starts, and then everything's mandatory, and everybody has to be there every day. And a lot of people defend their team and their players when guys don't show up to OTAs or they're not available or whatever it may be. The number one thing that gets said, a coach cannot call out a player for not being at OTAs because OTAs are voluntary. Now, it used to be voluntary mandatory, but because the only thing the owners give the players back in the collective bargaining agreement other than more money is OTAs, off-season training. It's like, okay, yeah, less off-season training. Then the union gets really hard about that. So Brian Callahan's never going to say, well, I'm furious that Johnny Joe isn't here. So forget about that. He'll always say it's optional and that, whoever's here's here. The end. I don't work for the team. Quarterback needs to be there. Now, if you got a contract issue, that's one thing. But again, the quarterback needs to be there. The second thing is, if you got paid that offseason, you need to be there. Calvin Ridley, you need to be at OTAs. L'Jarius Sneed, you need to be at OTAs. Chidobe Awuzie, you need to be at OTAs. Now, Sneed was there in the building. He just wasn't performing, which is a whole nother concern. But my question for you is, and if you're in a position battle, you need to be there. Because you need to be impressing the coaches and you need to be making sure that you get every rep possible to get better and all that kind of stuff. If you're an established veteran, and like Jeffrey Simmons doesn't have to be there. Now, as a leader, I'd like him to be there, but he doesn't have to be there every day. But like if you're an established veteran, you can go ahead and do what you want to do. You get paid that offseason, Lloyd Cushenberry, you get that tush over to OTAs. So I do wonder who's going to be absent tomorrow. And I do wonder what excuses are going to be made for those guys when they are absent. Like, oh, no, it's not a big deal that Johnny's not there. Johnny is hanging on for dear life for a starting spot. Like Jalen Duncan was not out there last time. Now, maybe he's hurt, which is a concern. But if Jalen Duncan, and I'm saying if Jalen Duncan is just choosing not to go to OTAs, oh, no, I can work out in California. So I do wonder tomorrow who will be there, who won't be there. And I do wonder, for the guys that aren't there, what are the predetermined excuses the text line will have tomorrow? Joel texts in, by the way, and says, how about them baseball Vols? Vols and Vandy had nice weekends at the SEC tournament. Not sure I care that much, but good for them. That's going to do it for us. We are out of here. We're back tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Again, Titans OTAs tomorrow, Stillman and Company. We'll see you tomorrow, too.